Take one slow breath with me. I'm Joe, and you've done enough for today. From here on, you don't have to chase sleep anymore. Just listen. Let the rain fill the quiet spaces. Let these true crime stories gently occupy your thoughts, and let the night do the rest. There are only a few ads in the first 10 minutes, then nothing to interrupt your rest for hours. If this little escape helps you unwind, I'd love it if you subscribed and left a like. Tell me where you're resting tonight. Now, let's begin. Case 1. It was the 13th of October, 1992, a Tuesday. 22-year-old Corey Wienecke was at home in West Liberty, Iowa, United States. The night before, he had worked a late-night shift at his grandparents' restaurant, Wink's Bar and Grill. He worked there most nights as a bartender and was due to work again that night. So when his fiancée, Jody Hotz, arrived home at around 6:30 p.m., she was surprised to see his car still in the driveway and Corey's dog, a golden Labrador retriever called Casey, outside. Corey was a popular football player and well known in the area. He had played for the West Liberty High School Comets and made it to the state championships. When he began dating Jody, they seemed like a good match, and they made plans for their future. They moved to a farmhouse outside of town. Jody worked at a bank in Iowa City during the day, and as Corey worked at night, he was normally gone by the time she got home. So when she returned that evening, and it appeared he was still home, she was worried. Jody noticed that their dog was unchained outside, which was not normal, and that the screen door to their home was wide open. Jody walked up to the house and found the main door unlocked. She walked around the house and found Corey. He was lying on the floor of the bedroom and was not moving. She called 911 to report that her fiancé was dead, telling the dispatcher that he was covered in blood, was not breathing, and was cold. Police arrived at the farmhouse and confirmed that Corey was dead. He had sustained multiple blunt force injuries, including one that fractured his skull. He had been beaten to death. Police spoke to Jody. She told them that he was supposed to be at work and that she had last seen him that morning at 8:30 a.m. when she left the house for work. He had been asleep at the time. Corey was seen returning home from Iowa City around 7 a.m. that morning. Police did not believe that a robbery had taken place, as nothing was missing. It seemed to be a targeted attack. Somebody had entered the house, it appeared, with the intention of beating Corey. When police widened their investigation and news of Corey's death broke, a farmer told police that he had driven past Corey's house at 1:30 p.m. that afternoon and had seen a metal baseball bat on the side of the road near the house. He had driven past earlier that morning, around 9 a.m., and had not seen the bat at that time. Because of that, police believed Corey was killed between 9 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. And police managed to retrieve the bat, and traces of blood found on it matched Corey's blood type. Police believed the bat was the murder weapon, as the injuries Corey had sustained were in line with the type of injuries a bat could inflict. The bat was sent for forensic testing and was later confirmed to be the murder weapon. But even though police had the murder weapon, no fingerprints or DNA evidence was found on it. Police believed Corey knew his killer. There was no evidence to suggest it was a random killing. They believed it could be connected to a relationship Corey had with a woman who was not Jody. Police discovered that Corey was seeing multiple women at the time of his death, and that in turn led to many possible suspects. They interviewed more than 400 people in the months following his death. Despite that, the case went cold. 10 years after Corey's death, police still had nothing solid and were not sure what the motive was. Sergeant Mark Kopf of the Muscatine County Sheriff's Office made a public appeal, urging anyone who knew something about the case to come forward. Police needed someone to come forward and share details of what they knew. They got the break they needed, some 25 years after Corey was murdered, and the information they received came down to a chance encounter in December 2017. In December 2017, Special Agent Trent Valletta of the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation went to a hospital in Iowa to talk to a witness in an entirely separate matter. While he was there, he spoke to a nurse called Jessica Becker. Agent Valletta told her that he worked on cold cases. That prompted her to share a story with him about a time when she was just 9 years old. Jessica told Agent Valletta that she had witnessed an incident in 1992. One night, she stayed at her friend's house for a sleepover. That friend was the daughter of Jacques Hazen. Jacques was the sister-in-law of Annette Cahill. Police were familiar with Annette. They had spoken to her after Corey's murder, as they discovered she was one of 4 women he was having a sexual relationship with at the time of his death. But at the time, Annette told police she was shopping in Iowa City with Jacques when Corey was murdered, and Jacques produced store receipts to support the claim. Jessica told Agent Valletta that when she stayed over at Jacques' house after Corey's murder, she sneaked downstairs with her friend after bedtime. When they got to the bottom of the stairs, she heard Annette in the dining area and saw her from behind. According to Jessica, Annette was crying and lighting black candles, and Jessica heard her repeatedly apologize to Corey, say that she had never meant to hurt or kill him, and tell him that she loved him. Jessica said she went back upstairs so that Annette would not see her. She told Agent Valletta that she had told her mother about it afterwards, but her mother did not want to report it to the police. Based on his conversation with Jessica, Agent Valletta looked at the investigation surrounding Corey's death again. In the file, they found a report from an interview that took place in 1996 with a man called Scott Payne. Scott was friends with Jacques and Annette. The report noted that, according to Scott, Annette had been seen burning a quantity of items after Corey was killed. Scott was re-interviewed. He said he remembered seeing Annette burning blood-stained clothing in a barrel at Jacques' house. When asked when that was, he said it was around 1 or 2 days after Corey was murdered. He claimed Annette had told him she was burning the clothing because there was paint on it. However, he told police that he believed it was blood, not paint, and that he was familiar with blood, as he worked at a meatpacking house slaughtering pigs. Police arrested and charged Annette with first-degree murder. She was 56 years old at the time of her trial. It was the prosecution's case that she had committed first-degree murder by killing Corey willfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice aforethought. That trial ended in a mistrial, as the jury could not reach a verdict. After nearly a full day of deliberations, the jury could not reach a unanimous conclusion on the possible verdict. They initially voted 11-1 to acquit. The judge gave them more time to deliberate, but when they were called back into court again, they were still deadlocked, so a mistrial was declared. Annette was tried again. At Annette's second trial, it was the prosecution's case that she had killed Corey in a jealous rage over his engagement, and the fact that he had a sexual relationship with other women. The court heard that Corey was struck 13 times and that all the blows had been inflicted while he was alive. The prosecution told the jury that the murder weapon, a bat, was found 1 mile from Corey's house. It was initially found by a reporter who could not get his car to start, walked down a gravel road, and found it at the side of the road. A farmer confirmed he had seen it there at 1:30 p.m. The bat had white tape around the handle and a blue barrel with Power Flight Heavyweight in white lettering on it. The white lettering appeared to have bloodstains on it. The court heard that the bat had been bought at a Walmart and could have been left over from the previous year's inventory. It had a $15 retail price and had been bought on sale for $13. The court heard that the cause of death was blunt force trauma. The court heard that the night before Corey's murder, when he was at work, Annette showed up. Corey left Winks at closing time with a woman called Wendy Marshall. When police spoke to Wendy at the time, she told them that when they left the bar, they were confronted by Annette, who was waiting for Corey in his car. She was drunk, and Corey offered to drive her home. Wendy and Corey got into his car with Annette. According to Wendy, at one point on their way to Annette's house, Annette became agitated and jumped out of the car. Corey got out and spoke to her. He dropped Wendy back at Winks, as her own car was parked there, and then dropped Annette home. He met up with Wendy later that night. By the next morning, Corey was back at his home and asleep in bed when Jody left for work. The court heard witness testimony from Jessica Becker and her mother. Jessica told the court about what she had seen one night when she was 9 years old. The same details she had shared with Agent Veleda. Her mother confirmed that Jessica had told her what she saw at the time, but she had not reported it because she was afraid of what might happen to them, given how brutal and vicious the attack on Corey had been. The court also heard from Scott Payne, who had not testified at Annette's first trial. He shared with the court the details he had previously given police, namely that he had seen Annette burning what he believed was blood-stained clothing. It was the defense's case that Annette had an alibi and did not kill Corey. The court heard that there was no physical evidence linking Annette to Corey's murder. Hairs found in Corey's hand had not been linked to Annette. No fingerprints or blood connected to Annette were found on the bat. According to Annette, she saw Corey the night before he was murdered. She was jealous when she saw him with another woman, but said they made up and had sex. Annette claimed she spent the next day working a roofing job with Jacques, and that when she called at Corey's house that morning, she believed there was nobody home, as there was no answer when she knocked on the door. In relation to Annette's defense, that she was at a construction job site and then went shopping with Jacques the day Corey was murdered. The prosecution argued that the receipts did not cover the time Corey was killed. Jacques testified that she had picked Annette up at the job site around 10 a.m., and that they stopped at Corey's house on the way to Iowa City, as Annette wanted to drop a book back, but that nobody was home, and nobody answered the door, so they went on to Iowa City. Jacques provided receipts for that trip in relation to purchases she made, but the only one with a timestamp was marked with a purchase made at 1:25 p.m. The defense tried to discredit Jessica. The court heard it was the defense's case that she was biased because Annette had had a sexual relationship with Jessica's stepfather when Jessica was a child. The jury deliberated and at one point told the judge they were deadlocked. The foreperson told the judge that he did not believe more time for deliberations would result in a unanimous verdict. The judge asked them to sleep on it and return the next day for further deliberations, which they did. After a total of 16 hours of deliberations, the jury announced that they had reached a unanimous decision. They found Annette guilty of second-degree murders. Annette filed a post-trial motion to compel discovery relating to the hairs found in Corey's hand. She asked that the state provide any other information about the testing performed on the hairs. If the evidence had been lost or destroyed, Annette asked the court to order the state to explain how that had happened. She asked the court for a new trial based on a Brady violation and on the unfairness of the jury lacking a spoliation instruction based on the destroyed evidence. The court denied the motion, and she was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Annette appealed her conviction on a number of different grounds. One argument concerned the prosecution witnesses. At the outset of her trial, Annette had sought to exclude the testimony of Jessica Becker, Jessica's mother, and Scott Payne. That motion had been denied. On appeal, Annette claimed that Jessica's account of what she saw could not be true, arguing that 1. Jessica could not have seen Annette in the dining area while standing on the stairs because the stairway was fully enclosed and had a door at the base that opened out and away from the stairs. 2. Jessica was unable to recall other details of the home's layout, even though she claimed to have spent the night there many times over the years. 3. Jessica did not recall the date of the sleepover or whether other children were present that night. Annette also argued that Scott's testimony could not be trusted, claiming there were contradictions between statements he made to police in 1996 and 2019. Another argument in Annette's appeal was based on the hairs found in Corey's hand. She argued that there were 4 human hairs in his hand, and that the state had presented no evidence that the hair matched Annette's. The appeal also pointed out that if there was hair in his hand, he must have been aware of the attack. Annette argued that there must have been more than one attacker, as Corey was a football player, an experienced fighter, and weighed 230 pounds. Annette argued that there was insufficient evidence to show she committed the murder. The court stated that it would uphold the verdict if it was supported by substantial evidence that, viewed in the light most favorable to the state, could convince a rational fact-finder that the defendant was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Annette highlighted a number of points that she said indicated insufficient evidence in her case. 1. She never confessed to the murder. 2. There was no physical evidence linking her to the murder. 3. There were no eyewitnesses to Corey's murder. 4. There was no witness who could place her with the bat or murder weapon. 5. There was no witness or indication that she had planned to attack Corey. Annette argued that the only evidence the prosecution had was the testimony of Jessica, Jessica's mother, and Scott Payne. On that basis, she requested that her conviction be set aside. The court disagreed. Annette lost her appeal, and her conviction and 50-year sentence stood. The court noted that although the evidence was not overwhelming, when viewed in the light most favorable to the state, it did not fall short of the substantial evidence threshold. Case 2. It was the 12th of November, 2002, a Tuesday. 14-year-old Terry and 11-year-old Caitlin Marsh arrived home at 4 p.m. that afternoon. They had been at school that day and expected to find their mother, 48-year-old Heather Barnett, waiting for them at home. But when they entered their ground-floor apartment in Bournemouth, Dorset, England, United Kingdom, they were met with silence. Their mother worked from home as a seamstress, so it was unusual for her not to be at home. Terry went into his bedroom to change his clothes while Caitlin called out for Heather. There was no reply. Caitlin knocked on the closed bathroom door and, when there was no answer, opened it slightly. Terry heard her scream and ran to see what was wrong. Their mother was lying on her back on the bathroom floor. There was blood everywhere. Heather was dead. She had been violently stabbed and her body had been mutilated. One of her hands was holding a clump of hair. Terry called police and told them that their mother had been murdered and that they needed help immediately. When police arrived, they discovered there were no signs of any forced entry. Did Heather know her killer? Police believed Heather had been murdered in her sewing room, as there were spatter stains on the patio doors of that room. There was a trail of blood from that room through the living room and into the bathroom where her body was found. There was a large pool of blood underneath her body. Heather's bra had been cut between the cups. Her throat was slashed from ear to ear. Both of Heather's breasts had been cut off and placed on the floor beside her body. Police traced the blood found in the apartment using luminol. And based on faint footprints, it appeared that whoever killed Heather had walked back from the bathroom towards her sewing room. The footprints then stopped at the hall beside the front door, which indicated that the person responsible may have removed their shoes before leaving. Police began their investigation. Heather was last seen that morning. She had dropped the children off at school, and CCTV footage showed her white Fiat Punto turning into Capstone Road, where she lived shortly afterwards. Just one day after Heather's murder, her son Terry told police that her keys had gone missing the week before. He told police that they went missing after an Italian man called Danny called at the apartment. Danny had asked Heather to make curtains for him. Police carried out door-to-door inquiries 5 days after Heather's murder. A man called Danilo Restivo lived just across from Heather's apartment. When police called at his apartment, they found his Nike trainers in the bath, soaking in bleach. Invisible traces of blood were later found inside the trainers. Danilo had moved to England to marry a woman called Fiamma Marsango, whom he had met online. That woman lived across from Heather, and he had moved in with her in May 2012. Police believed Danilo was the person who murdered Heather, but they did not have enough evidence to charge him. They feared he was a danger to others, and they kept him under surveillance. That surveillance continued for some time, and through it, police discovered other things about Danilo. In May 2004, police observed him following women. And on one occasion, when he was stopped and searched, he had a large knife and a packet of tissues in his bag. In the boot of his car, police found a hooded jacket, a balaclava, and gloves, and they found 2 pairs of scissors inside the car. Police also bugged his home and listened to his conversations with his wife and to calls he made and received. In one of the covert recordings, he was heard speaking of his love of touching and holding women's hair. Police discovered that reports had been made by 15 women in the United Kingdom and 9 women in Italy in relation to incidents involving their hair being cut. The women were either traveling by bus or sitting in the cinema when a man cut their hair. One woman, Holly Stroud, was asked in 2004 if she could pick out the man responsible from an identity parade, and she identified Danilo as the man who had cut her hair while she traveled to school the year before. Danilo's fetish for cutting women's hair was of interest to police because of the clump of hair found in Heather's hand. Danilo was arrested in 2006, and his home was searched again. Police found a lock of hair tied with green cotton. Danilo claimed it had been planted. Police did not have enough evidence to charge him with Heather's murder, so he was released. As the years went on and technology and tests improved, scientists continued to re-examine the material recovered from Heather's apartment and the traces of blood on Danilo's trainers. In 2008, scientists made a link between DNA material found on a green towel recovered from Heather's apartment and Danilo. Even though it was a great break in the case, police needed more evidence to ensure the prosecution could secure a conviction. They did not believe they had enough to charge him with Heather's murder. That changed in 2010. In 2010, the body of 16-year-old Elisa Claps was found in the loft of the Church of the Most Holy Trinity in Potenza, Italy. Elisa had been missing since the 12th of September 1993, and the last person she had been seen with was Danilo. Like Heather, Elisa had suffered brutal chest and stab wounds. Elisa's remains revealed cuts to her bones, which indicated she had received at least 9 stab wounds from behind and 3 from the front. The stab wound that went through the front of her neck to her spinal cord may have been caused by scissors. Her trousers, top, bra, and underwear had been cut with scissors. Her trousers had been lowered. There was hair found in each hand, and it had been cut from her own head after her death. Because of the similarities between the 2 murders, police arrested and charged Danilo with Heather Barnett's murder. When he was arrested and charged, police told Danilo that a blood-stained green towel had been found in Heather's apartment, and that a DNA profile linked to him had been found on it. He told police that it was his towel, but that he had given it to Heather to use as a color sample for curtains he wanted her to make for him. Danilo pleaded not guilty. It was the prosecution's case that Danilo had killed and mutilated Heather. The prosecution warned the jury that the details they would hear throughout the trial would be harrowing and distressing. The prosecutor, Michael Bowes, QC, opened his case with the factual details of what had happened that day, telling the jury that on the 12th of November 2002, 2 children, aged 14 and 11, had come home from school in Bournemouth to find their mother brutally murdered and her body mutilated with a knife. She had been killed by repeated forceful blows to the head, and her body had then been dragged to the bathroom in the flat, where her children found her. The children found their mother not only dead, but brutally mutilated. The jury heard the harrowing account Terry had given to police at the time. The prosecutor described how Terry had sensed something was wrong because of the unusual silence, how he noticed the bathroom door was closed, how Caitlin opened it a little, and how both children then discovered their mother lying dead on the bathroom floor. The jury heard that Terry had told police the silence made him feel something was wrong even though nothing looked out of place, and the video of Terry's account was played in full. He had told police at the time that as soon as he saw the blood, it was clear it was no accident and that his mother had been murdered. The court heard that just after the children found the body, Danilo and Fiamma arrived home and comforted them. The court heard that there was no sign of any forced entry, and the prosecution believed that Heather had either opened the front door for Danilo that day, or that he had let himself in using Heather's keys, which had gone missing a week earlier. The prosecution told the jury about Danilo's fetish for hair, and the jury heard about him cutting women's hair on buses and at the cinema. 2 schoolgirls reported having their hair cut while Danilo was sitting directly behind them on the bus, and one of the girls said there was something white and sticky in her hair afterwards. Another man described a different occasion when he saw Danilo sitting behind a woman on a bus with her hair and his hands under a jacket placed on his lap. The court heard about Danilo's visits to the park that police observed while he was under surveillance. He was filmed watching women, and on some occasions he hid in the long grass to avoid detection. He always wore gloves, even when the weather was good, and changed his shirt and trainers regularly when out. Hair was found in Heather's hand, but the identity of the person it belonged to was not known. Tests revealed that the person had recently changed their diet and had visited Florida, but despite appeals, a match was not found. It was the prosecution's case that Danilo had murdered Heather in a premeditated manner, one made all the worse by his knowledge that her children would find her body inside their home. The jury were told that he then tried to conceal what he had done, and in a deliberate attempt to remove any forensic link to the scene, placed his shoes in bleach. In relation to the towel found inside Heather's home, the prosecution told the court that they believed Danilo may have used it to wipe Heather's blood from himself and simply forgot to take it with him. The pathologist, Dr. Alan Anscombe, testified. He told the court that he had arrived at Heather's apartment at 8:45 p.m. and that she was lying on her back on the bathroom floor with her legs straight. Dr. Anscombe testified that Heather's right hand rested on her lower belly and that a clump of light brown hair was resting in the palm of her hand. Her upper clothing had been pulled up to the level of her breasts, and her jeans had been unfastened and slightly pulled down. Heather's breasts had been cut off and placed on the floor on either side of her head. He believed a knife or another sharp instrument had been used, and he noted that there was nothing to suggest any great skill had been used. The court heard that Heather's throat had been completely cut across. Heather's trousers had been open and lowered, and a gloved hand had been placed inside her underwear. But the court heard there was no suggestion of SA. There was a trail of blood from the workroom through the living room and into the bathroom where her body was found, and there was a large pool of blood beneath her body. When asked whether he could state an exact time of death with certainty, Dr. Anscombe said he could not, but that it was likely closer to the time she was last seen alive in the morning than to the time of 4 p.m. when she was found. The court heard that the day after Heather's body was found, Dr. Anscombe carried out a post-mortem examination, and his report identified 10 separate injuries to Heather's head. One of the injuries was so severe that it had penetrated through to the skull, revealing brain tissue. There was a shallow 24-centimeter interrupted cut running vertically down the front of her abdomen and 2 smaller, separate wounds on either side. There were further injuries to Heather's hands. Dr. Anscombe testified that the injuries were not random and appeared to have been carried out with a degree of care and control. There was a lack of bleeding in relation to some of Heather's injuries, which indicated that they had been carried out when she was already dead. Dr. Anscombe determined that the cause of death was multiple head injuries. He believed that a weapon, such as a form of hammer, had been used. The court heard about the death of Elisa Claps and the discovery of her body in the loft of a church in Potenza, southern Italy, in March 2010. The prosecution said there were striking similarities between the murders of Elisa and Heather. Elisa had been repeatedly stabbed, and hair had been cut from her own head and placed beside her body. Elisa's bra had been cut at the front, and Heather's bra had been cut in the same way. The prosecutor said the cut hair at both murder scenes was akin to a hallmark. The prosecution told the court that Danilo had been interested in Elisa, but that she was not interested in him romantically. He arranged to meet her at the Church of the Most Holy Trinity in Potenza at 11:30 a.m. And the prosecutor told the jury that after their meeting, she was not seen again. It had been a busy Sunday morning when they met. People were out and about, and a lot of people attended the church. Elisa had been reluctant to meet Danilo that day. She was aware of rumors about him and had heard about his fetish for cutting hair. But Elisa felt sorry for him when she discovered he had bought her a gift for passing her retakes, so she went along to meet him. Even though suspicion immediately fell on Danilo, he claimed he saw her leave the church and that he had stayed on to pray. Danilo got home 1 hour later with a cut on his hand. When police asked him about the cut on his hand, he told them he had fallen on a building site. In 1995, Danilo was convicted in Italy of giving false information to the prosecutor over the injury to his hand, sustained on the day Elisa disappeared. At that point, no body had been found and no further charges were brought. Elisa's body was found under a pile of old tiles in the loft in the 2010. In relation to Elisa's case, the court heard that an inquiry was taking place in Italy and that Elisa's murder was not a matter for the jury to decide. They were to decide and return a verdict only in relation to Heather's case. It was the defense's case that Danilo was not involved in Heather's murder and that the DNA found on the towel only indicated that it was his towel. He did not deny that, but claimed he had given it to Heather to use as a color match only. Danilo also claimed he had an alibi and had been working on a computer at an educational center around the time Heather was murdered. But the court heard that an evidential capture by a digital forensics expert showed there was no user activity on the computer between 9:08 a.m. and 10:10 a.m. The jury deliberated for 5 hours and found Danilo guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison. At the sentencing hearing, Mr. Justice Burnett told Danilo that the murder was so serious that no minimum term would be appropriate. He described the exceptionally high seriousness of the offense, the depravity of the killing, the careful planning and preparation, its sexual content, and the previous killing of Elisa Claps, and concluded that the alternative starting point of a 30-year minimum term would not be appropriate. He said he could find no mitigation, that none had been advanced on Danilo's behalf, and that in his judgment there was no minimum period that could properly be set, and that Danilo would never be released from prison. The judge said Heather's murder was one of inhuman depravity. He told Danilo that he had known an 11-year-old girl and a 14-year-old boy would find their mother butchered on the bathroom floor, and that this feature of the case would haunt those who had sat through it. He said that although he did not know why Danilo had picked Heather Barnett as his victim, it was clear he had done so to satisfy a sadistic sexual appetite, and that the evidence showed him to be a cold, depraved, calculated killer. The court also heard Caitlin's victim impact statement. She spoke of the horror of finding her mother in that way and described how, when police told her that her mother was dead, she felt as if her heart had been ripped out. She said she had been in a state of complete and utter shock, and that it had taken months before she accepted the truth, that she had understood the words used, but felt that such things did not happen to people like her mom. Caitlin also referred to how her life had changed as a result of that day. She said she no longer liked going into bathrooms, that she used to think someone might be waiting for her, and that she now held a fear of what was behind the bathroom door. She said it had been several years before she accepted the help of a child psychologist to cope with what had happened, that her mom was no longer able to help her celebrate her successes or pull her through disappointments, and that she would never again get the chance to tell her how much she loved her and how much she now missed her. She said the only person she could now fully trust and rely upon was Terry, and that her mom had been taken from her. She said the home she had shared with her mom was now tainted with someone else's violent actions, that she had not been back there since, and that she could not face even going near their old front door, as it reminded her too much of the horror that had awaited her and her brother. Danilo was sentenced to serve life in prison, a whole life sentence, which meant there would be no possibility of parole. The family of Elisa Claps claimed that Danilo should have been in prison in Italy and should not have been allowed to live in the United Kingdom and given an opportunity to kill Heather. Elisa's brother, Gildo, and mother, Philomena, claimed that the church where Elisa's body was found had never been searched properly. They also claimed that no search warrant had been issued to search Danilo's home at the time, despite everyone knowing that Elisa was not seen again after meeting him. Some people in Italy believed that Danilo was protected because his father was the director of the National Library in Italy. Claims have even been made that people knew where Elisa's body was, but that nothing was done. Before Elisa's body was found, there were numerous rumors about what had happened to her. There was talk of Elisa being seen in a white Fiat Uno, either in Potenza or Rome, that an Albanian was involved in her disappearance, and that she had been sold into prostitution. There were suspicious deaths 3 people with small links to the case died in car crashes. Elisa's diary was found to have a page missing, and tests on the pieces of paper left attached revealed that words had been written in Albanian. There was also talk of a church cover-up. Despite all the rumors, a trial went ahead, and Danilo was charged with murder. Danilo was found guilty in his absence of the murder of Elisa by an Italian court and sentenced to a 30-year prison term. The Criminal Cases Review Commission took an interest in Danilo's trial in the United Kingdom. A man called Omar Benguit had been convicted of killing South Korean student Jong Ok-shin in July 2002. Jong had been stabbed to death 3 streets from Heather's home. Omar was tried 3 times for the murder. The first 2 trials ended in mistrials. His legal team appealed based on their belief that Danilo, not Omar, had actually killed Jong. But the appeal was lost and his conviction was upheld. Danilo appealed against the whole life term he had been given in relation to Heather's murder. His lawyer argued that the judge should not have taken Elisa's murder into account when sentencing, as he had not been convicted of Elisa's murder at that stage. The Court of Appeal agreed and altered his minimum sentence to 40 years instead. Case 3. It was the 4th of May, 2010, a Tuesday. 38-year-old bookmaker Suzanne Pilley was due at work at 9 a.m. that morning. She worked at infrastructure management on Thistle Street in Edinburgh, Scotland, United Kingdom, and had worked there for almost 2 years. When her co-workers realized that Suzanne was not at her desk that morning, so out of character for her, they contacted her parents. Her parents, Robert and Sylvia Pilley, had last heard from her that morning at 8:30 a.m. when she sent them a text message saying she was on her way to work. The fact that she did not start her workday as normal made her parents concerned that something had happened to her on the way in. They had not heard from her since that early text message and reported her missing to police that afternoon. In the days that followed, police put out appeals and spoke to those who knew Suzanne. There was no activity on her bank cards or mobile phone. She did not use her bus pass, and she did not contact any friends or family. Her family did not believe she would have decided to leave without telling anyone. She had fish and a cat, and they were still at home. Her father, Robert, said at the time that it was as if she had been swallowed up by some sort of Bermuda Triangle, that it was beyond belief, that she had texted him and her mom, but within half an hour was gone, and that he did not know how someone could vanish into thin air. He said she had no history of anything like this, that she was not depressed or worried, that it was so out of character, and that she had been just as usual when she left for work. Police obtained CCTV footage from the area, and through it they discovered that Suzanne had started her day as normal and taken her usual route into work that morning. Suzanne left her apartment on Whitson Road at 8 a.m. 20 minutes later, she boarded a number 2 bus at Stevenson Drive before taking the number 4 on Dalry Road, opposite Caledonian Terrace. Suzanne got off that bus on Princess Street outside Jenner's at 8:48 a.m. She then went into a Sainsbury's convenience store beside her workplace, something she did most mornings, and was seen on CCTV there at 8:51 a.m. She then made her way to her work at infrastructure management on Thistle Street. She was last seen on CCTV at the building on the corner beside her workplace, just 50 meters from her office front door, before she seemingly vanished. A black cab was stopped close to where Suzanne was last seen at 8:55 a.m. Police did not believe the driver was involved in Suzanne's disappearance, but appealed for him to come forward to assist with their investigation. As the search for Suzanne went on, police believed they were dealing with foul play. They began looking into Suzanne's personal life and discovered that she may have been involved in a love triangle. Suzanne was a single woman, but police discovered that she had dated a co-worker and that the relationship had recently ended when Suzanne met a new partner. Police looked at her mobile records to get a better understanding of her personal life. They spoke to those closest to Suzanne, and her neighbors confirmed they had seen a man apparently living with her for around 6 months. Police spoke to a man called David Gilroy. David was a married man and one of Suzanne's co-workers. David and Suzanne had had an affair, and he had lived with Suzanne at one point. He was questioned by police and told them that the relationship had ended in December 2009, that he had moved back home to be with his wife and children, and that he was trying to make that work. He told police that Suzanne was dating other men. A couple of weeks after Suzanne went missing, David reported a break-in to police. He told them that someone had broken into his house while he was asleep and stolen his mobile phone and laptop. According to David, when his wife got up, she found the back door had been broken in. They had heard a small noise, but nothing major. When asked whether he believed the break-in was connected to Suzanne's disappearance, he said he did not know. The investigation then took a more worrying and sinister twist. Police revealed that they were looking for the driver of a silver car that may have stopped in a remote forest. They announced that they were looking into the movements of a car on remote roads across Argyle and Butte on the afternoon and evening of the 5th of May, the day after Suzanne was last seen. In particular, they wanted to hear from anyone who had seen that car between 1 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. and between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. The public were also informed that the police investigation had changed from a missing person case to a murder investigation. Police revealed they were conducting a search covering some 400 square miles of rural Argyle and Butte. They believed that Suzanne had been murdered and that her body had been dumped or buried somewhere around 90 miles away from where she was last seen. The investigation focused on the Rest and Be Thankful and Argyle Forest, but despite extensive searches, nothing was found. Police later narrowed the search area to 5 square miles and believed that Suzanne's body might be buried in Glen Crow, Argyle, and Butte. Despite the fact that Suzanne had not been found and there was no body, police believed they had enough evidence to charge David Gilroy with murder. The challenging murder inquiry saw police speak to nearly 1,500 potential witnesses and take 1,164 statements. They gathered 2,325 productions to use in evidence and obtained CCTV footage from 250 separate locations. They also searched 30 different areas in Argyle. It was the prosecution's case that even though there was no body, the evidence would show that Suzanne had been murdered, and that she had been murdered by David. Prosecution told the court that David and Suzanne had been in a relationship, having met at work, but that Suzanne ended the relationship just before she went missing because she had met someone else. Suzanne's mother testified. Sylvia told the court that her daughter had married in 2004 and divorced, that she had bought her own apartment in Edinburgh, and that David had moved into the apartment in 2009. Sylvia told the court that David had left his wife and was seeking a divorce, and that Suzanne was not the cause of the breakup. The court heard that David was obsessed with Suzanne and had sent more than 400 texts in the month before she went missing. He did not want the relationship to be over. Phone records showed that David was in contact with Suzanne almost daily before her disappearance, texting her more than 50 times a day. He last contacted her the day before she went missing, the 3rd of May, when he sent 15 text messages and 1 voicemail. It was the prosecution's case that Suzanne headed into work as normal on the 4th of May, and that David was waiting for her and strangled her almost as soon as she entered the office block, after possibly luring her to the basement. It was their case that he then hid her body in the basement level of their office and returned home to get his car, a silver Vauxhall Vectra. The prosecution believed that David put Suzanne's body in the boot of his car. The court heard that David bought air fresheners and repeatedly visited the basement and garage areas of the infrastructure management offices that same day, with no reason to be there. David then went about the rest of his day as normal. He went to a presentation at his daughter's school with his wife, and they then went for a meal at Victoria on Leith Walk. The court heard that on the night of the 4th of May, he made an appointment to visit a school and went there the next day, the 5th of May. David claimed he was going on a site visit to a school in Loch Gilphead in Argyll and Bute. The school was a client of his employer, but there was no need for him to be there that day. He called at the school, and a cleaner gave him bin bags and cable ties. Police reconstructed his trip to Argyll via CCTV and his mobile phone records. The court heard that there were gaps of several hours on both his outward and return journeys between Loch Gilphead and Inverary, and that the journey took 2 hours longer each way than it should have. It was the prosecution's case that he hid Suzanne's body somewhere in that area, an area he knew well, and where the court heard he had gone on walking holidays with Suzanne before. When David's car was examined, vegetative matter was found on it, and there were 3 fractured coil springs, which the prosecution argued indicated it had been driven off-road. The court also heard that David had turned off his phone at one point during the journey. The court heard that cadaver dogs, which can identify the smell of human remains, showed interest in the boot of David's Vauxhall Vectra and in areas of the basement at the office block. The court heard that on the 6th of May, when David went to the police station to give a statement, it was observed that he had scratches on his hands, a cut on his forehead, bruises on his chest, and other scratches to his hands, wrist, and forearms. And the prosecution claimed that he had tried to conceal these by covering them with makeup when he spoke to police. Gail Hawkins, Suzanne's friend, testified and told the court that Suzanne had previously said she was worried David had hacked her email account and was accessing her emails. The court heard that it was the prosecution's case that David had accessed her emails between the 24th of August, 2009 and the 30th of April, 2010, and that he had also accessed her account on an internet dating website. The court heard testimony from Helen Liddell, a financial administrator at Infrastructure Management, who worked with Suzanne and David, but was not aware they had been in a relationship. She accessed the emails following Suzanne's disappearance and told the court that she had found emails between David Gilroy and Suzanne. Helen told the court that she was very surprised by the contents of the emails and that it was clear they were having an affair, a relationship. The jury were shown CCTV footage of Suzanne and David 2 days before she disappeared. On the evening of the 2nd of May, David and Suzanne went shopping at a convenience store, despite David telling police that their relationship had ended in December 2009. The court heard that police narrowed the search area for Suzanne's body to 5 square miles based on David's phone records, as they discovered his phone was pinging off phone masts in the Glen Crow area on the 5th of May. Glen Crow is a glen in the heart of the Arachar Alps on the Cowal Peninsula, in Argyll and Bute, and is surrounded by large and rugged mountains characterized by huge boulders. There was also a sighting of a silver family car parked on a track in the Glen Crow area that same day. Despite the narrowing of the search area, the court heard that it was still a vast and complex task to find remains there, as there were mountains, steep terrain, and dense forests. It was the defense's case that there was no evidence against their client, and that the prosecution's case was purely circumstantial. Suzanne's body had not been found, and the prosecution could only speculate that she was dead and how she may have died. There were no witnesses, there was no confession, and there was no DNA or blood found. Everything the prosecution had was circumstantial. The defense's case was short and lasted less than a day, based on their argument that the prosecution had not proven its case. David did not testify himself, but the defense called some of his co-workers to give evidence. They testified that they had not noticed anything out of the ordinary at the office on the 4th of May. The jury deliberated for 2.5 days and were not unanimous in their decision. The court agreed to accept a majority verdict, and on that basis, David was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison and ordered to serve a minimum term of 18 years. To date, Suzanne's remains have not been found. Sadly, her father, Rob, died in 2019 without ever finding out exactly what had happened to his daughter. Her mother, Sylvia, and sister, Gail Fairgrieve, hoped that Suzanne will be found soon, as the family wished to say a proper goodbye. Gail said that for the past decade, the family had lived in a state of limbo, waiting for the news that Suzanne's body had been found, but had never been able to get closure. She said that they understood only one person could tell them where Suzanne was, but that he had refused to do so, and that Police Scotland were committed to bringing them some form of closure. She said their investigation could only conclude when Suzanne was found, and she pleaded with anyone who knew something but had not come forward to search their conscience and get in touch, not for the family's sake, but for Suzanne's, so that they could give her the burial and send-off she deserved. David has refused to reveal where Suzanne is buried, as he continues to maintain his innocence. Case 5. It was the 2nd of September 2015, a Wednesday. 35-year-old Kendra Hatcher pulled into the parking garage at Gables Park 17. She lived there, and it felt safe as there was a 24-hour concierge service, and it was a vibrant and luxurious apartment block with a saltwater infinity pool, a fitness studio, and a gourmet coffee bar in uptown Dallas, Texas, United States. She grew up in Pleasant Plains, Illinois, and studied dentistry there, but moved to Dallas for work. She had recently accepted a job at Smile Zone. It seemed a perfect fit for her. Kendra had a strong Christian faith and wanted to use her skills as a dentist to help others. Smile Zone offered high-end dentistry to children from disadvantaged households. In her spare time, Kendra taught Bible study and took part in volunteer programs, which involved building churches abroad and performing free dental work for children in Ecuador. Kendra's professional life was going from strength to strength, and her personal life was blossoming too. Kendra was in a relationship with Dr. Ricardo Ricky Paniagua. Ricky was completing a dermatology residency at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, and even though they had only been in a relationship for a few months, they had already discussed marriage. Kendra and Ricky met via the dating app Tinder and went on their first date on the 24th of May, and from that very first date, they were inseparable. They both had similar values and wanted the same things in life. That evening, the 2nd of September, Kendra drove into the parking garage to park her car after work. She got there at 7:42 p.m. It was something she did every day, but she was excited for the weekend ahead, as she had plans to spend that Labor Day weekend in Mexico with Ricky. But Kendra would never make it to Mexico. Just minutes after she drove into the parking garage, 2 men walking through the parking garage heard the sound of screams and shots fired. After the shots were heard, a Jeep Cherokee was seen speeding out of the garage. Hashem Saad, who lived in the apartment complex, heard the screams and called 911. When police arrived, they found Kendra's body in the parking garage. She had been shot dead. The initial thought was that it was a robbery, as Kendra's coach purse was missing. Bullet shards and a handgun magazine were found on the ground beside her body. But as police investigated further and examined the scene, they thought the manner of the shooting did not suggest that it was a robbery. It seemed more like an execution-style shooting. The gunshot residue found indicated that Kendra had her hands up and behind her head when she was shot. The entry wound came from the upper part of her head, and the bullet exited through her chin. But who would want to kill Kendra in an execution-style shooting? By all accounts, she was well-liked and helped anyone she could. Police obtained the security cameras at Gables Park 17. The footage showed a Jeep Grand Cherokee entering the parking garage at 7:15 p.m. The footage showed Kendra returning home and driving into that same garage at 7:42 p.m. The footage captured a man walking towards Kendra's car, and then that same man was captured on the footage returning to the Jeep. Police believed that that was the man who shot Kendra. The footage revealed that there was another person involved. The driver of the Jeep was a woman, and she drove out of the parking garage as soon as the man got back into the Jeep. But it wasn't clear enough to be able to identify them, so police released images of the Jeep and the driver to the media and appealed to the public for help. That appeal worked. A man named Jose Luis Ortiz contacted police and told them that the Jeep was his, but that he wasn't involved in any shooting and wasn't driving it at the time of the murder. Jose told police that on the morning of the 2nd of September, two friends of his named Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez asked if they could borrow his Jeep. He said that they told him that Crystal's car was having mechanical issues and they left the car with Jose for him to work on it. And he gave them his Jeep to use in the meantime. They were supposed to drop the Jeep back to him that evening after work, but instead Brenda asked him to meet him at a Chili's restaurant that evening, and he agreed. Crystal wasn't at the restaurant, and neither was his Jeep. Jose told police that he was with Brenda at the restaurant at the time the shooting took place. The Jeep was returned to Jose's house later that night. Jose had no idea that his Jeep would be used as a getaway car. He said that the first time he became aware of it was when he saw the appeal the police made and recognized his Jeep. He asked Brenda about it, and she told him that it wasn't his Jeep, but then later said that Crystal used it to go there to get drugs for somebody, and probably something went wrong. Jose told police that Brenda urged him not to say anything, as it was his Jeep, and that he could get in trouble with the police and risk his citizenship. He felt that she was trying to manipulate him. According to Jose, Brenda suggested that he paint the Jeep a different color, and she would pay for it. After speaking to Brenda, Jose reported the matter to the police. Police spoke to Brenda and asked her about Kendra. Brenda told police that she had no idea who Kendra was and never saw her before. They asked her where she was at 7:42 p.m. the night of the 2nd of September. And Brenda told police that she was at a Chili's restaurant with Jose, and she showed them the receipts for the dinner. Police asked her about Jose's Jeep. According to Brenda, she gave the Jeep to Crystal. Police questioned Crystal. She was a 23-year-old single mother. They asked her if she was the woman seen on the footage driving the Jeep. She confirmed that she was. She initially told police that an armed carjacker got into the Jeep and forced her to drive to the parking garage that night. She told police her 9-year-old son was with her, but the footage showed that there was no child in the car. When police told her that, Crystal changed her story. She told police that there was no carjacking, and she drove the man to the garage willingly, but claimed that she thought it was just for a robbery. She insisted she knew nothing about the shooting. Police asked her why she agreed to drive there in the first place, even if she did believe it was for a robbery, and she told them that Brenda asked her to do it. Police asked her why Brenda would want to steal from Kendra, and she told them that Kendra was dating Brenda's former boyfriend. Police discovered that Brenda and Ricky dated on and off from 2012 until the beginning of 2015. When they separated, he began dating Kendra, and Brenda wasn't happy. But Ricky had no idea that she was unhappy. He ended the relationship in February 2015 and dated other women. When he met Kendra in May, he knew it was serious, so he sent Brenda an email out of courtesy to let her know he was in a serious relationship. He didn't tell her Kendra's name, and Brenda seemed fine and told him that she hoped they would remain friends. As the questioning continued and the evidence mounted, Crystal wanted to make a plea deal, and she agreed to testify in exchange for a shorter sentence. She told police that Brenda wanted Kendra dead, and the murder was all her idea. According to Crystal, within 2 weeks of her meeting Brenda, they began planning Kendra's murder. Police discovered that Brenda wasn't just unhappy that her relationship with Ricky was over, she was obsessed and desperate to get him back. She pretended to Ricky that she was happy being friends, but her life had started to unravel. Her grades dropped and she missed work. She set about making it her full-time job almost to get Ricky back. She cyber-stalked both Kendra and Ricky and hacked Ricky's email and discovered plans they were making and trips they booked. She grew to resent Kendra. She believed that Kendra had taken her place. According to Crystal, she made up her mind that she wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher. Brenda asked Crystal if she knew anyone who could help, and Crystal agreed to help. They began making a plan to kill Kendra. They met up numerous times and devised multiple plans. The initial plan was to inject Kendra with heroin or a sedative, and then they discussed shooting her. Brenda asked Crystal if she could find someone to do it, or if she knew anyone, as she was from a rundown area. They drove around and asked a number of people if they could help. They later met a man named Christopher Love. He agreed to help, and they discussed different ways that they could kill Kendra. They made a unanimous decision that the best way to kill her would be to shoot her, as it would be fast. Crystal told police that Brenda agreed to give her $500, and she agreed to give Christopher money and drugs. Crystal told police that they chose to kill Kendra on the 2nd of September, as they were aware that Kendra and Ricky had plans for Labor Day weekend and would be leaving Dallas on the 3rd of September to go to Mexico for a vacation. Brenda believed they had to do it before then, as she became aware that they made plans to move to San Francisco when they got back. Brenda knew about all of their plans and everything they did, as she had loaded Ricky's iPhone account onto another phone and used that to track/stalk him. Brenda told Crystal that she wanted the killing to look like a robbery gone bad. To decide where to carry out the killing, Brenda and Crystal decided to follow Kendra to see what her movements were like on a regular and normal day for her. They followed her to work. They sat outside a Salvation Army and used binoculars to monitor her movements while she was at work. After work, they followed her back and discovered how best to gain access into the parking garage. They figured out that they could easily get inside if they parked in a visitor spot first, and then followed another car into the garage. They did that same routine for a few days to ensure that nothing changed. They were confident they knew exactly what Kendra would do on the 2nd of September. The three of them, Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher, did one last run through the day before, on the 1st of September, and timed it. They stole gloves, syringes, disinfectant spray, and wipes from Kendra's workplace. The next day, the 2nd of September, the plan was for Crystal and Christopher to carry out the murder alone. Early that morning, Brenda and Crystal collected the Jeep from Jose and picked up Christopher at a Jack in the Box. Brenda was dropped off at a library in Carrollton, and Crystal and Christopher went to Kendra's apartment complex alone. When they got there, they waited across the street for 30 minutes or so, and drove to Kendra's place of work. Crystal left to pick up her son and nephew from school and dropped them off with her grandmother. She drove back to Kendra's place of work and followed her when she left. They lost her in traffic and they got back first, so they accessed the garage and waited for her there. As soon as Kendra drove in, Christopher got out of the car. He was wearing gloves and approached Kendra with the gun and shot her as she got out of the car. According to Crystal, she didn't actually see the shooting, but heard it. They left, and after Crystal dropped Christopher home, she collected her son and later met Brenda at Jose's house, where she dropped back his Jeep. On foot of the deal Crystal made, she would be the star witness for the prosecution. There would be 2 trials. Christopher and Brenda were charged with capital murder, and their trials were heard separately. In exchange for her testimony and her guilty plea to a murder charge, Crystal was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Police found a gun hidden in a side compartment in Christopher's car. The gun was the one used to shoot Kendra. Due to that, Christopher was willing to talk. He told police that Brenda promised to pay him in both drugs and money, and that he was hired by her to shoot Kendra. Christopher was found guilty and sentenced to death. Before Brenda faced trial, she went on the run for almost 7 months. She was even featured on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. She was arrested in April 2016 in Torreon, Coahuila, Mexico. Mexico agreed to extradite her, but only on the basis that she would not face the death penalty. When she was extradited back to the United States, she was formally charged with capital murder. Her family and Ricky initially didn't believe that Brenda could be involved. They knew her as a loving woman, wholesome, and someone who had good family and Christian values. Ricky told police that when he ended the relationship with her, they remained friends, and he even sent her a text message the night Kendra was shot to let her know. She offered to help in any way she could. Brenda pleaded not guilty, and her defense argued that she wasn't even there when Kendra was shot and had an alibi and receipts to prove she was at a Chili's restaurant at the time of the murder. But it was the prosecution case that Kendra was killed as part of a murder for hire scheme orchestrated by Brenda. Brenda did not need to be there at the time of the shooting to be guilty of murder, and could still be found guilty as she planned and orchestrated the entire thing, and she was the person who hired Crystal and Christopher to carry out the murder. The court heard that Brenda had a motive to want Kendra dead. She saw her as being an obstacle to getting what she wanted. It was her desire to be back with Ricky. The court heard that in the months leading up to Kendra's death, Brenda had become increasingly obsessed with her and Ricky. The court heard testimony about that obsession from a number of people who knew Brenda. Her cousin, Moses Martinez, testified that Brenda was depressed after her relationship with Ricky ended. He testified that she offered to pay him if he hit Kendra with a baseball bat. He declined to do so. Brenda's friend, Jennifer Escobar, testified that Brenda was super obsessed with and angry towards Ricky when he ended their relationship. She told the court that Brenda would read through all of his emails and tracked his movements on her phone. She told the jury that Brenda had even kept a copy of his house key and had access to his bank accounts. Jennifer testified that Brenda asked her to eliminate Kendra Hatcher. She told the court that Brenda wanted her to either inject her with something fatal or use a bat and leave her in a coma. She told the court that Brenda offered to give her $2,000, a car, and drugs if she would do it. Jennifer discussed the offer with her parents and then declined. It was the prosecution case that Brenda asked a number of people to help her before she finally found someone to agree. It was their case that she took advantage of Crystal. Crystal was a struggling single mother who made $11 per hour, and she looked up to Brenda, a woman who had her own apartment and money and wanted to be like her. The court heard that she gave Crystal $500, and police found the ATM withdrawal receipt for that amount in her belongings. She also paid Christopher. He was given a cash sum and $600 worth of marijuana and $300 worth of cocaine. The jury were told that Brenda was at Chili's the night Kendra was shot and went straight home afterwards. But the jurors were shown footage from a surveillance video from Jose's neighbor's house of the night of the murder. And the footage showed that Brenda was at Jose's house after Chili's, and she was there with Crystal, and they exchanged the Jeep for the car. The court heard that cell phone data also placed her with Crystal and Christopher before the murder, and that Brenda and Crystal contacted each other 99 times over a 2-week period, from the 22nd of August to the 4th of September. The jury deliberated for just 30 minutes and found Brenda guilty. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Case 6. It was the 8th of March, 2018, a Thursday. 22-year-old Haley Anderson was up late playing board games and drinking with her roommates. They finished just before 4 a.m. and went to bed. They were all students at Binghamton University in Binghamton, New York, United States, and were in their final year and were looking forward to graduation. Haley was in their nursing program, and she had a job lined up in an emergency department in Long Island. When Haley's roommate, Josie Arton, woke a few hours later, she noticed that Haley wasn't in bed. That didn't cause alarm, as they were college students and were all independent and did their own thing. But later that night, she was concerned. Haley was supposed to meet Josie and other friends at a bar, but didn't show up, which wasn't like her at all. Josie noticed that she didn't post anything on any of her social media channels all day either. When she called her on her cell phone, there was no answer, and none of the text messages that her friends sent were responded to. Along with another roommate, Josie tracked Haley's iPhone using the app Find My Friends. Haley's cell phone was at a house on Oak Street. Orlando Tercero lived there. Orlando was in the nursing program also, and he and Haley dated briefly on and off for a little over a year. Orlando was born in Miami and grew up in Nicaragua before returning to the United States to study. He was a good student and studied during the week, and he liked to party when he had time off. Josie and another roommate, Michela Topali, went to Oak Street to see if Haley was there. Police had been called to the house on Oak Street earlier that day. Orlando's sister asked them to carry out a welfare check, as she had received a concerning text message from Orlando. Police called to the house, but there was no answer, and there didn't appear to be anyone home, so they left. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at the house. When Josie and Michela got there, there was also no answer when they knocked on the door, and there appeared to be nobody home. But they didn't leave. They stayed as they were worried about Haley. Orlando's car wasn't outside, but they knew from their app that Haley's phone was still inside. So they found a window that was open, and Josie helped Michela climb inside first, and then she followed her. They found Haley in Orlando's bedroom, partially tucked in under the covers on his bed. They weren't certain, but believed she may be dead as she was so pale. They called 911. Police and emergency services arrived at the house and confirmed Haley was dead. She had been strangled to death. There was no sign of Orlando anywhere. Police discovered that Haley and Orlando dated on and off, but Haley ended the relationship. She wanted to remain friends with Orlando, but Orlando wanted more. They had dated on and off for around a year, and Orlando wanted a more serious and committed relationship, but that was not what Haley wanted. She didn't want to be tied down while in college. The investigation revealed that a troubling incident took place 6 months before Haley was found dead. On the 15th of September 2017, Haley was at a party, and Orlando was seen shouting at her. He found out that she got back together with her ex-boyfriend, Kevin Ocampo, and he wasn't happy about it. He wanted her to be in a relationship with him only. Haley again told him that she didn't want that, but she wanted to remain friends. That night, Kevin stayed in Haley's apartment, and when he left the apartment the next morning, he saw that the tires on Haley's car were slashed. Haley reported the matter to police, but Orlando denied it. As the damage was more than $600, felony charges would be involved, and Haley didn't want Orlando to lose his place at college, so she agreed not to press charges if he paid for the tires. Haley's friends told police that Orlando seemed obsessed with her. He would call over unannounced and drive by the apartment. He watched her all the time. Despite that, Haley liked him and remained in touch with him. She didn't want him to feel left out. Police needed to ascertain what happened after Haley finished drinking and playing board games with friends. How did she end up at Orlando's house? They knew there were a number of surveillance cameras in the area and outside the house where Orlando lived. They viewed them and observed that Haley and Orlando entered his house together. Haley seemed fine at that point and seemed to go into the house willingly. A few hours later, the footage revealed that Orlando left the house alone and cleared out his garbage. He then went to a local pharmacy, purchased 2 sleeping aids, Zquil and melatonin, and then went back to the house. The footage revealed he left again 7 hours later and walked down to the basement of the house. Police believed that at that point, Orlando tried to take his own life in the basement. They found hooks and a rope. They believed that he fell instead and hurt himself. There was blood on the floor in the basement. They found what they believed was a suicide note written in Spanish, and the English translation read, "I'm really sorry about this. I never felt I could be capable of doing this. Father, I'll see you soon." Orlando's father had died 5 years earlier. They believed the note was not just a suicide note, but a confession too. The footage showed Orlando later leaving the house with a suitcase, and police tracked his movements to JFK International Airport. They discovered that he boarded a flight to Nicaragua. He had dual citizenship, and his mother still lived in Nicaragua. As he had dual citizenship, in relation to possible extradition, authorities in Nicaragua did not have to extradite him to the United States. Despite that, authorities in the United States charged him with second-degree murder in the hope that he would be returned to the United States for a trial. Authorities in Nicaragua made every effort to find Orlando, and they found him in a hospital in the city of Leon just 5 days after Haley's death. He was at the hospital seeking medical treatment for injuries that he sustained when he tried to take his own life. There was a lot of back and forth between authorities in the United States and in Nicaragua, and it took over a year before authorities in Nicaragua felt they had enough to charge Orlando and send him forward for trial. To the initial dismay of authorities in the United States, the trial would take place in Nicaragua, and the charges differed from those he faced in the United States. He was charged with femicide, which is a specific hate crime in Nicaragua and involves the murder of a woman based on her gender, one with whom the perpetrator had a relationship with. The charge was not the only difference in court proceedings. In Nicaragua, there was no jury. A judge would listen to the prosecution and the defense and then make a judgment. Orlando was also not required to enter a plea. It was the prosecution case that Haley willingly entered the house with Orlando, and a short time later, he strangled her to death. They believed that he possibly strangled her while she was asleep. It was their case that he was obsessed with her, and if he couldn't have her, nobody else would. They believed that he strangled her in a jealous rage when she refused to be in a serious relationship with him, and they believed that he festered that rage for 6 months. They believed it began at the party 6 months earlier when he discovered Haley got back with her ex-boyfriend. The court heard from witnesses in the U.S. via teleconferencing. Some of Haley's friends testified about Orlando's obsessive side when it came to Haley, how he drove by and called to the apartment, and about the slashed tires. The judge saw the surveillance footage from outside Orlando's house, which showed him entering with Haley and leaving without her. The court heard that Orlando attempted to commit suicide, and about the note he left behind for his family. Dr. James Tersian, the pathologist who conducted Haley's autopsy, testified that the cause of Haley's death was asphyxiation by neck compression. The court heard that Haley was asphyxiated from manual neck compression, with an element of ligature strangulation involved due to the necklace she was wearing. The prosecution told the court that Haley was murdered because she didn't want to be with Orlando. It was her decision to make, but one that he was not happy with. It was the defense case that Orlando had no recollection whatsoever of what happened that night. They argued that due to the use of alcohol, Orlando was temporarily insane at the time of Haley's death. They only called one witness, a psychiatrist, to testify about his state of mind. Dr. Ronald Lopez Aguilar testified that when he examined Orlando stated he had no recollection of the murder. He told him that he drank heavily that night, and when he woke up, Haley was dead. He had no idea what happened to her. Dr. Lopez Aguilar told the court that there was no way to know what Orlando's state of mind was at the time of the murder. But in relation to his current state of mind, he told the court that there was nothing wrong with it. The defense argued that Orlando was not a violent man and he may have been provoked. The judge retired for 90 minutes and returned with a verdict. Judge Fabiola Betancourt told the court that she found Orlando guilty. She said that she found that Orlando simply did not accept that Haley could make her own decisions and decide who she wanted to date, and he disposed of her due to that, and he wanted to punish her because she rejected him. She sentenced him to the maximum sentence that she could for the charge of femicide, which was 30 years in prison. She told the court that all women have the right to life. The Broome County District Attorney Steve Cornwell, who was watching the case with keen interest, said, "We saw something that we haven't seen before, but we saw two governments working together, law enforcement agencies working together. Despite initial reservations about what the trial would be like, authorities in the United States were happy with how everything was conducted, and that it was a serious trial, not a show trial." Orlando appealed his conviction. The appeal was heard before 3 magistrates in Nicaragua. The defense argument was the same, namely that Orlando was drunk and temporarily insane at the time of the murder, but they asked the court for a new psychiatric evaluation. The one at the trial was conducted by a court-appointed psychiatrist, and the defense wanted a forensic psychiatrist who specialized in temporary insanity defenses to examine Orlando instead for the appeal hearing. They also argued that Orlando faced second-degree murder charges in the U.S., and if found guilty of that, he would have received less than a 30-year sentence, and on that basis, the sentence should be reviewed. They argued he should not have been charged with femicide. The magistrates rejected the appeal for a new psychiatrist and refused to reduce his sentence. He was ordered to remain in prison on foot of his 30-year sentence handed down at his trial. If for some reason Orlando is ever freed and returns to the U.S., police in the U.S. have made it clear that they will immediately arrest him so that he can face a trial for a second-degree murder charge there. After the court denied the appeal, Haley's parents, Karen and Gordon Anderson, thanked the court for their work. Karen said, "Thank you very much for not granting the appeal. I have not seen any remorse from him. I've only seen regret that he is not going to be able to lessen his sentence. Unfortunately, I don't even think 30 years is enough, but I appreciate all the work you have done to convict him to the fullest extent of the law." Gordon believes justice has been served and also thanked the court. "I thank the Nicaraguan court system. I was a little uneasy when it first came about, not having control of the situation here in the United States. But as the trial progressed, I quickly felt assured that the right thing would be done, and I think a remarkable job was done. Gordon wants people to remember Haley for the compassionate person she was, one who had a zest for life and one who lived to spread joy and love. Broome County District Attorney Steve Cornwell emphasized how important it was that Orlando was charged with femicide. America's legal system doesn't have a criminal charge quite like Nicaragua's femicide, but the protection it afforded Haley Anderson in this case was important. Orlando Tercero, in a cold-blooded manner, choked the life out of a young woman who, we believe, was probably sleeping and had been drinking. It doesn't get any more sick and depraved than that, preying on somebody who's helpless and completely overpowered them with no chance at all. Case 7. It was the 24th of May, 2014, a Saturday. 56-year-old Blessy Gotinko had just finished work and was on her way home. She lived with her husband of 30 years, Antonio Gotinko, in North Shore, Auckland, New Zealand. They met when they were just children, as they attended the same school in Cebu City in the Philippines. They dated for a few years, got married, and had 3 children, Bea, Vincent, and John together. The family of 5 moved to New Zealand in 2004. Blessy loved living in Auckland as it allowed her to do the kind of things she loved, which included exploring, walking, and visiting new places. She had a job she enjoyed and great friends there. The children loved it too. Blessy had just celebrated her birthday with them on the 20th of May. She had lunch with the 3 children at a pub in Greenhithe and a family dinner that evening at Urban Turban in Wynyard Quarter. Her husband Antonio could not join them as he was on a work trip abroad. He was due to return on the 15th of June. Blessy couldn't wait to see him again. They were a very close family and were happiest when they were all together. That day, the 24th of May, Blessy left work at 7 p.m. She worked at Tower Insurance and was supposed to finish work at 5 p.m. that day, but she agreed to do a couple of extra hours overtime. Due to that, she had not arranged a ride home. A co-worker, Bahula Shah, collected Blessy that morning and gave her a ride to work, but as she finished at 5 p.m., she was gone before Blessy finished. There was a bus that stopped close to her home, though, and Blessy got the Birkenhead Transport's 973 bus from Lower Albert Street to Birkdale Road when she finished work. The bus stop was a 700-meter walk to her home. It should have taken her just 5 minutes to walk home. But Blessy never made it home that night. Blessy's daughter, Bea, was at work that night and got home at 3:15 a.m. the next morning. She noticed Blessy wasn't home and phoned her 2 brothers to ask if they knew where she was. They didn't. Bea began looking for her mother, and with the help of a Find My iPhone app, she found Blessy's phone on a grass verge in Salisbury Road, which was just 100 yards from their home, at 6 a.m. that morning. Around that same verge, she found Blessy's shoes and her Tupperware container that she used for her lunch, which she brought with her every day to work. When the police arrived, they initially thought they were dealing with a hit and run due to where Blessy's possessions were found and how they were scattered around the verge. Had she been struck by a vehicle and was now lost and disorientated somewhere? But it became apparent that something more sinister may have taken place. A young girl who lived on the street heard the sound of a woman scream around the same time Blessy got off the bus at the stop closest to her home. A BMW car was seen overtaking the bus Blessy was on, and that led police to question 28-year-old Tony Douglas Robertson. He told police that he had no idea who Blessy was or what happened to her. Police knew Tony well. He was a convicted sex offender and abductor and had been released from prison just 5 months earlier. He was subject to an extended supervision order, which included 24-hour GPS tracking, and he was being monitored at the time. He had a curfew and had to be home every night at 8 p.m. until 6 a.m. the next morning. Due to the GPS tracking device, which was an ankle bracelet, police were able to establish where he was around the time Blessy went missing. They discovered that he was on the street Blessy was on at around the same time. They also discovered that he spent time that day, the 24th of May, at Eskdale Cemetery and returned there the next day. That prompted police to search Eskdale Cemetery. With the help of a police dog, 2 days after Blessy went missing, her body was found under pine scrub in Eskdale Cemetery. Her body was covered with foliage and debris, and she was wrapped in a sheet. She had been raped and stabbed to death. Police arrested Tony, and he was charged with rape and murder. He pleaded not guilty. It was the prosecution case that Tony saw Blessy, who was a complete stranger to him, walking home as he was driving down Birkdale Street. It was their case that the evidence would show that he deliberately knocked her down, and as a result of that impact, her leg broke in 2 places. They believed that Tony got out of his car, picked Blessy up and put her in the back of his car, and drove back to his Birkdale apartment just before his 8 p.m. curfew kicked in. Due to that, no alarm was triggered as he was home at the time he was supposed to be home at. A witness testified that they saw Blessy get off the bus at Birkdale and walk away briskly. They saw a white sedan-like vehicle overtaking the bus before speeding down Salisbury Road. The court heard testimony from an 11-year-old girl. She testified that she lived on Salisbury Road with her family, and on the night of the 24th of May, she was cooking dumplings in the kitchen with her sister when she heard the sound of a car and a high-pitched scream at around 7:30 p.m. It was driving up the hill from Eskdale, and it stopped. Then I heard a high-pitched scream from a lady, and then there was nothing after that. The girl told the court that she then heard the car drive off in the direction of Birkdale Road. The court heard that it was the prosecution case that when Tony got back to his apartment, he parked his car in the garage beneath his home and raped Blessy. It was their case that he also strangled her and stabbed her in a frenzied and violent manner before slashing her throat. The jury heard that early the next morning, Tony wrapped Blessy's body in a bed sheet and put her body back in his car and drove her to the Eskdale Cemetery and dumped her body there. They believed that he waited until the next morning to bring Blessy's body to the cemetery so that his curfew would be finished. Forensic scientist Ryan Keir Morgan Smith testified that luminal testing was carried out at the area where Blessy's body was found, and that revealed a bloody path where her body had most likely been dragged. He testified that the blood trail indicated that a blood-stained object had been pulled through the grass, and the evidence showed that it was likely Blessy's body was carried through some of the cemetery before being put on the ground and dragged to the place where her body was later found. The court heard about the injuries that Blessy sustained. Pathologist Dr. Carl Wigren testified. He told the court that Blessy had been stabbed multiple times and the stab wounds were deep, and one was so violent that the links of Blessy's necklace were found embedded in its depths. Dr. Wigren testified that when Blessy's throat was slashed, it severed her windpipe. He told the court that he was certain all of her injuries were inflicted on her when she was alive, as he found blood in her lungs. He testified that Blessy had so many injuries that it was difficult to say which one caused her death, but it was likely a combination of strangling and blunt force trauma that she suffered as a result of being struck by the car and the stab wounds and the incise wounds. I think it's difficult to attribute death to one singular injury. But if I were to make a guess, more probable than not guess, it was the stabbing that hastened the death. The court heard that Blessy had several blunt force trauma injuries, including broken ribs, broken legs, broken or missing teeth, and abrasions to her body, which were consistent with post-mortem dragging. The court heard that he believed that Blessy was strangled first, as a way to subdue her, and that the stabbing and incise wounds happened after. There was evidence of manual strangulation. There was bruising on her neck. She had a fractured thyroid and broken capillaries in her eyes. Dr. Wigrin testified that Blessy could have survived being struck by the car if she had received medical help, but instead she received further injuries which included sharp force injuries, and that caused her to bleed substantially. Essentially, she bled out. When asked if there were any defensive wounds on her body, Dr. Wigrin told the court that there didn't appear to be, but he explained to the jury that that was not unusual in circumstances where a victim had died in such a violent manner. Dr. Wigrin testified that a number of samples were taken from Blessy's body and sent for DNA testing, and Tony's sperm was found on her body. The court heard that as Tony was wearing a GPS anklet at the time, they could see that he was at the Eskdale Cemetery hours before the murder took place, and they believed he was there to find a spot where he could hide a body. Due to that, they argued that the murder was planned in advance. They believed he selected the place where he would hide his victim's body before he had even selected his victim. The prosecutor in the case, Kieran Raftery, said, "This was not you looking for drugs. This was for you already looking for possible locations to dump the body of the person you were going to rape." The same device showed he revisited the area early the following morning, and that was when the prosecution believed he dumped Blessy's body there. The Crown prosecutor, Michael Walker, highlighted why those two visits to the cemetery were important to the case. He told the jury that they showed the defendant was planning to kill someone, and that his trip to the cemetery was scoping out where to dump the body. The court heard that blood was found in Tony's car and a knife, and some of Blessy's belongings were found buried in the back of his property. Traces of Blessy's blood was found on the knife. The court heard that there was damage found on Tony's BMW. Detective Constable Shane Page testified that the BMW appeared to have been damaged recently. A majority of the rear passenger's seatbelt was missing. When I dismantled the seatbelt, being the anchorage point, there was about a meter, I think 940 millimeters, of the seatbelt was missing. It had been cut. He testified that there was further damage inside the car, which included cuts and scratches to the leather seating in the back of the car. He told the court that a sizable area of the foam inside the back seat had been replaced with a different foam, and that there was blood on the passenger's seat and in the boot of the car. Auto glazier Michael Nelson testified that on the 26th of May, he was called to Tony's home to repair a broken BMW windscreen. He told the court that Tony told him that he needed the screen repaired as soon as possible. Michael noticed that the windscreen had already been removed from the car, which was unusual. He further observed that there was blood inside the car. Michael testified that he asked Tony what had caused the damage to the windscreen, and Tony told him that joking around with mates caused the glass to smash. He said that his friend slipped on the bonnet and crashed through the glass. Sergeant Blair Atkinson of the Serious Crash Unit testified that he believed Blessy was knocked down deliberately. He told the court that he believed that she was struck while she was walking on the pavement, and he based that belief on the fact A tire imprint was found on the verge near to where her belongings were found. It was the defense case that Tony caused Blessie's death, but that her death was not intentional and was in no way planned. It was their case that Tony accidentally knocked Blessie down that evening, and he panicked afterwards and inflicted all the injuries that were found on her body to make it look like a random attack. But he insisted that the injuries were inflicted after Blessie was already dead. During the case, Tony sacked his legal team and defended himself. He told the court that he denied the prosecution's version of events and said that he panicked after he hit Blessie accidentally. He told the court that the evidence would show that. He said that the only reason he put Blessie in his car and drove home was because of his curfew. I put her straight in my car to comply with my curfew that demanded I be there at 8 p.m. and stay there until 6 a.m. He said that the prosecution were wrong and the attack wasn't premeditated and that there were no witnesses to the car accident. He said that he was at the cemetery on the 24th and 25th of May because he was trying to buy drugs. In relation to the DNA evidence that was found, he argued that it was microscopic, and scientists had struggled to isolate and test. The court heard contrasting opinions from another pathologist in relation to the injuries that Blessie sustained. Dr. Chapman had reviewed Dr. Wigren's report and did not agree with him that Blessie had been strangled. A report by Dr. Chapman was read out in court, and in the report, he suggested that Blessie's neck injuries, in particular the fractured thyroid, could have been caused by another blow to that area. The report stated that the bruising on Blessie's neck didn't appear to be from fingertips. He also didn't agree that it was likely that she had inhaled her own blood after being stabbed. That would indicate that she wasn't alive at the time the stab wounds were made, which would align with Tony's version of events that he caused the stab wounds to make it look like a random attack after Blessie was already dead. Tony gave evidence. He told the court that when he put Blessie into his car, he thought she was already dead, and he said he tried to make her death look like a random attack because he was high on methamphetamine at the time. He also claimed he didn't rape Blessie. In relation to the DNA evidence, in the form of his semen that was found on Blessie's body, Tony told the court that that was not the result of rape, but instead was due to contamination and police malpractice. The jury didn't believe him. They found him guilty of rape and murder. Tony was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 24 years and preventive detention for the rape. In New Zealand, preventive detention is an open-ended jail term, which means that Tony can be imprisoned indefinitely or recalled at any time. He appealed on the basis that Blessie's death was accidental, and as that was the defense case, the jury should have been given the option to find him guilty of manslaughter instead. His appeal was rejected. He appealed to a higher court, the Supreme Court, and they ruled that he did not raise anything during the trial to suggest the alternative charge of manslaughter could have been reached. He was refused leave to appeal further. Tony was granted name suppression during the trial because of his previous convictions for child sexual offenses, and as a result, his criminal history was not revealed to the jury. It was only after Tony's sentence was handed down that the full details of his criminal past could be revealed. When he was just 18 years old, he kidnapped and molested a 5-year-old girl in Tauranga in 2005. A local officer acted on instinct and believed that Tony may be involved, set out to find him, and found him with the girl, and the girl's pants were down. He was found guilty of 7 charges, including indecently assaulting the girl and attempting to abduct 2 other children, and sentenced to 8 years in prison. Tony was released in December 2013. just 5 months before Blessy was murdered, and he breached the conditions of his release twice in a matter of weeks. Due to that, he was deemed a danger, and as such, an order was made stating that he had to be monitored for a decade and was required to wear a 24-hour GLS tracking anklet. That was the maximum period of an extended supervision order. The judge in that case, Justice Edwin Wiley, made the order due to the risk he posed. I am satisfied that Mr. Robertson poses a very considerable risk indeed. I consider that it is likely that he will commit an indecency on a child under the age of 12 years, and that he will abduct a child for the purpose of sexual connection. The evidence compels the conclusion that he is impulsive and that he is unable to control his anger and aggression. Mr. Robertson has a predilection for and a proclivity towards sexual offending. He has shown no remorse. Indeed, he continues to deny it. Despite that order being given before Blessy's murder, and despite the fact that Tony was wearing the GPS anklet and was being monitored at the time, it did not deter or indeed prevent him from the violent attack he inflicted on Blessy. The circumstances surrounding his release from prison, the order requiring him to be monitored and stating he was a risk, caused extra pain and anger for Blessy's family at a time of already unimaginable grief. He should have never had the opportunity to rape and murder her if he was being monitored. A government report was conducted, but it found there was no fault in the handling of Tony's case on the part of police or corrections, and that Tony alone was responsible for Blessy's death. They made 27 recommendations as to how management of high-risk offenders can be improved. Blessy's husband, Antonio, spoke to the media after the report was released and said that his family were disappointed and devastated by the inquiry's findings, and he believed that corrections do not have the capabilities to manage high-risk sex offenders. In fact, we think the offenders manage them. The Department of Corrections Minister, Judith Collins, said, Tony Robertson had served his full 8-year term in prison for his previous offense, the kidnap and molestation of a 5-year-old girl, having been denied parole on 3 occasions because of his lack of remorse. The residents of Birkdale, Auckland, were not told he had been released into their community. In a statement released by New Zealand police, Antonio said that Blessy is the light of our home, and without her, we will be lost in darkness. Right now, we are just trying to pretend that everything is okay, but deep inside, we are brokenhearted. We have been robbed. She is gone too soon. Case 8. It was the 22nd of June, 1980, a Sunday. Stephanie Mullen arrived home at around 4 a.m. She expected to find her 14-year-old sister, Suzanne Bombardier, asleep on the couch downstairs, but there was no sign of her. Stephanie assumed that she must have fallen asleep upstairs instead, with her 2 daughters, so she went straight to bed so as not to wake them. Stephanie had asked Suzanne to babysit her 2 girls, who were 5 and 6 years old, on the night of the 21st of June at Stephanie's Hudson Court apartment in Antioch, California, United States, and Suzanne agreed. It was the first day of summer, and Suzanne was looking forward to the months ahead. She had worked hard in school and made the honor roll for spring 1980. Stephanie knew that she could always rely on Suzanne. She was such a well-mannered, kind, and studious girl, and she adored her 2 nieces. At around noon on the 22nd of June, Stephanie got up to make a late breakfast for her daughters, and around the same time her mother called to ask if Suzanne was coming home. Stephanie asked her 2 daughters to check on Suzanne. They told her that she wasn't there and that she hadn't slept in their bedroom. Stephanie went to look for Suzanne herself, but she was nowhere to be found in the apartment. What happened to her? There was no sign that anything unusual had happened in the apartment, but nobody knew where Suzanne was, so the police were notified. Police tried to ascertain with some degree of certainty when Suzanne was last seen and when she was last at the apartment so they could start from there. Stephanie told police that the day before, the 21st of June, Stephanie was at work and she asked Suzanne to babysit that night so that she could go out to a co-worker's birthday party. As Stephanie had to go to the party straight from work, she asked Suzanne to drop off some clothes for her at the restaurant where she worked. Stephanie told police that Suzanne brought the clothes to the restaurant sometime between 7:30 p.m. and 8 p.m. the night of the 21st of June. She gave them to a co-worker as Stephanie was working, but Stephanie saw Suzanne across the street from the restaurant, and they waved at each other. Stephanie's two daughters told police that Suzanne was home with them after that, and looked after them that night, the night of the 21st of June, and she let them stay up late as a treat. They told police that Suzanne was wearing her nightgown and a red and white terry cloth bathrobe when they went to bed. Police discovered that Suzanne spoke to a friend on the phone at 1:30 a.m., and at that time, everything seemed fine with Suzanne. The friend told police that Suzanne told her that she was tired and was going to sleep. Stephanie got home at 4 a.m., so police believed that they were dealing with a 2.5-hour period between 1:30 a.m. and 4 a.m. as the timeline for when Suzanne went missing. There was no indication that Suzanne left the house to go anywhere herself, like a party of some sort, or that she may have run away. The overnight bag with her belongings inside that she brought with her to Stephanie's apartment was still at the apartment. Her shoes were still there, too. Her family were adamant she would not have left the two girls behind unattended unless she had no choice in the matter. None of her clothes, money, or belongings were missing from Stephanie's apartment or from her own home, where she lived with her mother and stepfather. Due to that, police wondered whether she had been kidnapped. Her father, Ted, told police that she must have known the person and let them inside, as there was no sign of any forced entry. There were no signs of a struggle either. Police believed that foul play was involved due to the unusual circumstances surrounding her disappearance, and they didn't rule out the possibility that she was kidnapped. Police had very little leads at that point, as the girls who were asleep in the apartment at the time didn't hear anything unusual, and none of the neighbors reported hearing or seeing any disturbance of any sort. A search began. 5 days later, around 97 miles from Stephanie's apartment, a fisherman found Suzanne's nude body floating in the San Joaquin River near the Antioch Bridge. Police confirmed her body had been in the water for several days before she was found. She'd been stabbed in the chest and died as a result of a single stab wound to the heart. There was evidence found that indicated Suzanne had been sexually assaulted, and DNA was obtained from her body, but testing was not as advanced then as it is now, so no match was found, but the evidence was retained and was stored on the police file. In the years that followed, there were many suspects, but police didn't have enough evidence to arrest or charge anyone. For almost 4 decades, the circumstances surrounding Suzanne's murder remained a mystery. In 2015, biological evidence was submitted to the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office Forensic Laboratory, which is equipped to conduct some of the most advanced DNA testing. 2 years later, police discovered that a DNA match had been found. The match identified a man named Mitchell Lynn Bacon. Mitchell was known to the police. Aside from having a lengthy criminal record and being a convicted sexual offender, he was a suspect in the case after Suzanne's body was found. Police spoke to him in 1980, shortly after Suzanne's body was found, and he told them that he had an alibi. He claimed he wasn't near the Hudson Court apartment around the time that Suzanne went missing, and he was at the Sand Hill Bar between Brentwood and Oakley with his aunt. He told police that he left there around 2 a.m. and went to a store at the intersection of Lone Tree Road and Highway 4 before heading home for the night. Mitchell was initially named as a suspect at the time because Suzanne's sister Stephanie knew him. She told police that she met him when she was on a date with another man. Even though he saw her with another man, he asked her out. She agreed and went on 3 dates with him. After going on the 3 dates, she realized that she didn't want to see him again, as she found him boring, but Mitchell didn't see things that way. He showed up at the restaurant where she worked and would just sit there and stare at her. He was described as being fixated on her. Mitchell told her that he found a house for them to live in, and when she stopped all contact with him, he left multiple messages for her at the restaurant and at her home. He later showed up at her apartment too, and she discovered that a co-worker had given him her home address. In 1980, he agreed to take a polygraph test when asked by the police, and even though the results were recorded as being inconclusive, he was cleared as the suspect. But 37 years later, and due to the DNA match, Mitchell was arrested and charged with murder, kidnapping, rape, and oral copulation. Mitchell is currently awaiting trial. The Contra Costa District Attorney's Office has not yet made a determination whether to seek the death penalty or to pursue a sentence of life without parole. Mitchell has not entered a plea yet. While the trial has not taken place yet, attorneys on both sides have given an indication as to what their cases will be like. The prosecutor in the case, Mary Knox, believes that Mitchell went to Stephanie's apartment and somehow gained access and threatened Suzanne. The prosecution believe, based on everything they know about Suzanne and statements made about her by her family, that there is no way she would have left the apartment, leaving behind the 2 young girls inside alone, unless she had no option in the matter. The prosecution believe that Mitchell used a 5.5-inch long knife to threaten Suzanne with and force her to leave the apartment to go to a second location. They believe that he raped, stabbed her through the heart, and then dumped Suzanne's body in the river. The injuries show that Suzanne was stabbed once, but it was with such force that it went through her body. Mary said that the evidence suggested that Mitchell killed Suzanne during the rape itself. Her death happened in very close proximity to the time Mr. Bacon's DNA was deposited into Bombardier's mouth. Think of the amount of force you'd have to use to drive a knife through someone's body. Mitchell's lawyer, Cynthia Schofield, also gave an indication of the type of defense that they may use. She admitted that there was probably sexual contact between her client and Suzanne, and that part could not be argued due to the DNA found, but that sexual contact may have occurred after Suzanne's death. She claimed that it was possible her client had sex with Suzanne after she was already dead, and that the DNA found just indicated that sexual contact took place. It didn't indicate that he was responsible for her rape and murder. She raised the possibility that necrophilia as a defense may be used. We have no evidence the sexual act was prior to death. We cannot assume that. She also pointed to her belief that there was no evidence found that a kidnapping had even taken place. Police confirmed at the time that there were no signs of a struggle or forced entry at Stephanie's apartment. She believes that the prosecution's case amounts to unanswered questions and a lot of speculation. Prior to his arrest on charges relating to Suzanne's death, Mitchell spent time in prison already. He was arrested in Mountain View in Silicon Valley for rape, robbery, assault, with intent to commit murder and oral copulation in 1973. A year later, he was convicted of first and second-degree burglary, assault with intent to murder, and sodomy. He was sentenced to 5 years to life in prison. After he was released from prison, he was arrested for robbery and rape in Ileton and convicted of first-degree burglary, robbery, rape, and sodomy. He was sentenced to 24 years in prison. In 2002, he was convicted in Contra Costa County of failing to properly register as a sex offender and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. His crimes included tying ropes around a woman during the rape and sexually assaulting another woman with a cigarette. It was reported that he also stabbed her while humming a song to himself. In relation to the charges he faces for Suzanne's murder, he is next due in court in March 2022. Case 9. It was the 11th of October 2015, a Sunday. That afternoon, 18-year-old Zoe Hastings left her house in Dallas, Texas, United States, to go to Bible study. She told her parents, Jim and Cheryl, that she would be home after Bible study for dinner. Zoe graduated in May 2015 and was preparing to go on a mission trip for her church in November. Zoe was excited about the trip, and she wanted to make sure to attend that Bible study class, as it included preparations and instructions for the trip. Zoe left the house after 4:30 p.m. to head to the class at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It was due to begin at 5 p.m. She left in the family minivan. Her parents expected her home around 6:30 p.m. At 6:30 p.m., there was no sign of Zoe, and her parents were worried about her, as it was very out of character for her not to be at the family dinner. She loved sitting down for dinner with her parents and her 3 younger sisters and 1 younger brother. Thinking that she may just have been delayed, they sent her text messages. When they received no reply, they called her multiple times, but there was no answer. They reached out to friends to see if anyone knew where she was, but nobody saw her. In fact, her family discovered that Zoe did not attend the 5 p.m. Bible study class. Zoe's parents called police at 10 p.m., but by midnight, the police had not arrived at their house, so they went ahead and filed a missing persons report and continued looking for her themselves. A few hours later, in the early hours of the Monday morning, her parents realized that Zoe had a Find My iPhone app installed on her phone. They managed to figure out where her phone was from that. It was at a nearby creek, which was just a 5-minute drive from her home. Zoe's parents went straight there, but by the time they got there were already people there. They saw lights, police tape, and paramedics. They were informed a vehicle had been involved in a crash. The minivan that Zoe was driving was found crashed in the creek. It was nose down in the creek bed, almost in a vertical position. Police were there on foot of a call made by a member of the public. A man, Kurt Arnhem, was out walking his dog and observed a man running towards him. The man told him that there was a crash, and a car and a girl were down in the creek near the intersection Easton Road and Lippett Avenue. Kurt went down to the creek with the man, and the man told Kurt that the girl was dead. Kurt called 911. The other man left the scene before police arrived. When asked what the man was like, Kurt told police he was visibly shaken. Police went down to the creek and found the girl. It was Zoe. She was lying face down in a pool of blood and was around 10 to 20 feet from the driver's door of the minivan. Zoe's parents were informed that Zoe was dead, but police notified them that their daughter had not died due to injuries sustained from the crash. Her death was the result of homicidal violence. Zoe's dress was pulled up above her waist. Her underwear was rolled down to her mid-thighs. Police believed that she had been sexually assaulted. Her throat was cut multiple times. Police searched the area. The doors, with the exception of the driver's door of the minivan, were all locked. They found a knife that was covered in blood at the top of the embankment, and police believed that that was the knife used to cut Zoe's neck. Zoe's phone gave police a timeline to work with. Her phone was at the creek, and location services data on the phone revealed it was there from 5:01 p.m. on the Sunday evening and remained there until the Monday morning when Zoe's body was found. During the course of their investigation, police discovered that after Zoe left her house, she stopped at Walgreens on Garland Road to return a Redbox movie on her way to the Bible study. The Walgreens was so close to her house that she could see her house from the car park. She dropped the movie back at 4:42 p.m. So what happened to her after that, and why didn't she make it to the church for 5 p.m.? 2 witnesses came forward. They told police that they observed a woman at a minivan in the car park outside Walgreens. One of the men claimed he saw an African-American man rapidly approach her, and they both got into the minivan and drove off. He told police that the man was driving the minivan. The second man told police that he saw the man approach the woman, and it looked like he had something in his hand. The man said something to her, and they both got into the minivan, and the man drove off at speed. DNA was obtained from the knife found at the creek, and police got a match. It was matched to a man whose DNA was already in the database. His name was Antonio Cochran. Antonio denied any involvement, but due to the DNA results and the accounts given to police from the witnesses, he was charged with capital murder based on the murder of Zoe in the course of committing or attempting to commit a kidnapping. Major Max Giron of the Dallas Police Department described Antonio as obviously a sexual predator that's been taken off the streets. Police believed that it was a random attack and that he did not know Zoe prior to the abduction. When his trial began, he pleaded not guilty. It was the prosecution case that Zoe left her home that Sunday afternoon to go to Bible study. And on the way, she stopped off at the Walgreens across the street from her house to drop a Redbox movie back. The court heard that the prosecution believed that Zoe was abducted from the car park there just as she was about to get into the minivan. That belief was corroborated by 2 witness accounts, and those witnesses were present in court to give testimony. The first witness, Lester Lee Clark, testified that he worked as a tattoo artist at a tattoo parlor located near the intersection of Garland Road and Peavy Road in East Dallas, and was walking towards the Walgreens store at around 4:45 p.m. to buy a pack of cigarettes. He told the jury that he saw a woman who was either returning a movie or getting one from the Redbox kiosk, walking back towards a minivan. He observed that as she was about to get in, a short, heavy-set African-American male approached her. He was moving fast and grabbed the car door. He noticed that he had what he described as a kind of animated conversation with Zoe. Lester testified that he could not hear what they were talking about, but that it lasted no more than 5 seconds, and the woman, who was at the driver's door, got in and moved across to the passenger side. The man got in and drove off. When asked why he didn't get help, he told the court that he thought they were boyfriend and girlfriend. The second witness, a man named Gary Whitman, testified. The court heard that he was homeless at the time and was across the street from the Walgreens at around 4:45 p.m. that Sunday afternoon. He testified that he saw a stout, heavy-set African-American man, about 5 feet and 8 or 9 inches in height, walk up to a woman who was at a minivan in the car park at the Walgreens store. He described his walk for the court, and the jury heard that he was walking aggressively in a sneaky way. He believed that he was trying not to cause too much attention. Gary testified that the man approached the woman from behind as she was trying to get into the minivan. He told the court that the man put his arms out to stop her from getting away, and he believed he took something from his pocket, but he couldn't see what it was. He saw them both get into the minivan and testified that the man drove off in the minivan. The court heard that Gary tried to get help. As he had no access to a phone, he asked an employee at a convenience store to call 911. The prosecution told the jury that they believed that the man the 2 men saw was Antonio, and that they had further evidence, DNA evidence, to prove same. The court heard that multiple hairs were collected from the crime scene and examined, and that DNA analysis determined that Antonio's mitochondrial DNA profile could not be excluded from a hair found in Zoe's left hand. Gloria Jean Dimmick, a mitochondrial DNA analyst, testified that mitochondrial DNA is not a unique identifier. It cannot identify a particular individual, but it can be used to exclude people. It was the prosecution case that after Antonio abducted Zoe, he drove to the nearby creek, sexually assaulted her, and killed her there. The jury heard the knife was found at the creek, and Antonio's DNA was on the handle of the knife, and the knife was covered in Zoe's blood. Zoe's mother, Cheryl, testified. She told the jury that when they traced Zoe's phone to the creek, they went straight there and saw the police, and they instantly knew that something was not right. As we drove up, you could see emergency lights. They gave us the horrible news that she had passed. She testified that after her own daughter was raped and murdered, she became a sex assault trauma nurse. The court heard that cell phone data placed Antonio at the scene. Prior to Zoe's abduction, Antonio sent a number of text messages to various people. At 1:48 a.m. on the Sunday, he sent a text to Gillis Pina, his housemate, and said that he was moving out of the house. At 2:07 p.m., he sent a text message to Angie Simon, his ex-girlfriend, and told her that Rena, who had been like a mother to him, had died the day before. He sent text messages at 2:25 p.m. and 3:19 p.m. to Mimi and told her he had been driving, drinking, and crying. No text messages were sent between 3:19 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. on the Sunday. At 4:34 p.m., Antonio's cell phone communicated with a particular transceiver on a radio tower in Dallas, and the area covered by it included the Walgreens store. Just after 9:30 p.m. on the Sunday night, Antonio sent a text message to Frank Torres, Gillis Pina's brother. "I really need you, bro. I don't know I'm not well. Frank, to how much has happened. I need you, bro." The court heard that Antonio started at a new job as a checker at a Fiesta Mart grocery store just 2 days before Zoe's murder. He was scheduled to work the day after Zoe's death, but he did not show up for that shift. That night, he sent a text message at 9:35 p.m. to Angie Simon. "No, I was for you, and my life is over. I'll find out soon enough. Siestico." The court also heard about web searches that had been carried out on Antonio's phone between the 13th of October and the 23rd of October, which was the day before he was arrested. He searched for local news and crime 32 times, and 5 related to Zoe's death. Prior to that timeline, in the 30 days before that, he looked up news only once, and it was a Daily Mail article about gang crime. The court heard about Zoe's injuries and the cuts to her neck. She was stabbed 6 times. But the testimony in relation to sexual assault by the medical examiner, Dallas County's chief medical examiner, Dr. Jeffrey Barnard, came as a surprise to many when he testified that he found no evidence of trauma that would suggest sexual assault. It was the defense case that the prosecution and the police targeted the wrong man based on weak DNA evidence and unreliable witness testimony. They told the jury that at the time of Zoe's murder, Antonio was helping a friend. Defense attorney Paul Johnson cast doubt on the testimony given by the 2 witnesses who testified they saw Zoe's abduction. Paul challenged Lester on his testimony, questioning whether he was correct with the timeline he gave and with the description of the man he provided to the police. Paul told the court that the other witness, Gary, had a criminal history and could not be trusted. The court heard about his drug use, and Paul questioned how he would have seen anything at all if he was across the street. Gary accepted he didn't see the man's face, but claimed he came forward as it was the right thing to do, even though it had consequences for him. There was an active warrant for his arrest, and Gary was taken into custody after he testified in court. The defense also questioned the DNA evidence. They conceded that Antonio's DNA was on the handle of the knife, but they claimed that it was on it before it was used to murder Zoe. Antonio was identified as a suspect when the DNA found on the handle of the knife was compared to DNA of several suspects on the system. The court heard it was touch or handler DNA that was found. That can occur when something is touched and the person who touched it leaves behind their DNA on it. Testing revealed that the DNA from the knife handle matched Antonio's DNA, but the defense argued that his DNA may have already been on the handle from an earlier date, as he may have handled the knife while he was working at a local movie theater. Items such as knives were sometimes found there, and Antonio may have found it and touched it, and then another person may have later used that same knife to kill Zoe and somehow manage not to leave their own DNA on it. The defense reminded the jury that no fingerprints were found on or inside the minivan. If he grabbed the door, as the witnesses claimed, then why was there no fingerprints on it? He also referred to the evidence given by the medical examiner that there was no evidence of sexual assault found. Antonio was not charged with sexual assault. Paul believed the sexual assault was referred to inflame the jury. Paul urged the jury to find Antonio not guilty. I know this case is going to stay with you for a long time. The popular thing to do today would be to go back there and convict. I'm going to ask you to do the thing you told me you would do. Make the hard decision, do what is right, and return a verdict of not guilty. The prosecution disagreed and asked the jury to find him guilty. The jury deliberated for nearly 23 hours over several days. During that time, they asked the judge for further detail/clarification, 3 points. They asked to see a picture of the Walgreens store where Zoe was last seen. They asked about mitochondrial DNA, and they asked about the time frame of police interviews with the two men who testified that they saw a man fitting Antonio's description with Zoe at her minivan. The jury found Antonio guilty of the lesser included offense of murder instead of capital murder. It took them just 6 minutes to decide his sentence. Antonio was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and a $10,000 fine. Zoe's family issued a statement after her death. We are devastated at the loss of our daughter Zoe. Today, we express our gratitude to local law enforcement, officials, and loved ones helping our family. Our Zoe was full of life and love and light. She was full of talent. She was happy and joyful. She is loved by her parents and her siblings. She loved the Lord, Jesus Christ, and loved serving others. She was planning to serve a mission, to share this message of the Savior's love with others. It pains us to know that her life has been taken, yet we feel comfort in knowing that our family is forever and we will be together again someday. We are grateful for the privacy and respect given to us during this extremely difficult time. Please continue to pray for our family. We appreciate and need your support. After the trial, it was revealed that it was not Antonio's first conviction. Antonio had a history of arrests and convictions, including assault, theft, and burglary. In February 2014, he was arrested in Bowie County, Texas. He was accused of raping a teenage girl in a car, and the case was sent forward for trial. A 17-year-old girl testified at that trial that Antonio had been in a relationship with her mother, and he offered to give her a ride on the 12th of February, 2014. She told the court he threatened to kill her in the car and drove to a wooded area and then sexually assaulted her. During the assault, residents who lived nearby approached the car with flashlights. They had been on alert due to a number of burglaries in the area. They called 911. Antonio was arrested. At his trial for that case, which took place in January 2015, the defense claimed the sex was consensual. He was found not guilty. Case 10. It was the 10th of February 2013, a Sunday. Jessica Nelson worked with 25-year-old Tasha Lucia and was concerned when she could not get in touch with her. She called her multiple times, but there was no answer. They worked together at Locklear's Beach City Grill on Folly Beach, and Tasha did not show up for her shift that day. And Jessica tried to get in touch with her all day to no avail. Jessica had a gut feeling that something was wrong, and it was a feeling she couldn't shake. So, along with another colleague, the two women went to Tasha's home at 5 p.m. that afternoon. Tasha didn't live alone. She lived with her boyfriend, Robert Tilleman Kronsberg, in James Island, Charleston County, South Carolina, United States. When Jessica and her colleague arrived at Tasha's home, they knocked on the door several times. There was no answer. They noticed that the front living room window was open, so they climbed inside. They immediately noticed that Robert was home as they heard loud snores coming from one of the bedrooms, and when they looked inside, Robert was asleep on the bed. They woke him and asked where Tasha was, but they did not understand what he said. It was just unintelligible mumbling. The words he was saying didn't make sense, so they searched the home, looking for Tasha, and found her lying on a bed in another bedroom. When they lifted up the sheet that was over her, they saw a large knife sticking out of her chest. Tasha was dead. The two women were so frightened that they ran outside screaming and called 911. Some of Tasha's friends saw bruises on her before, and some were aware that Robert would hurt her, but they never believed he would kill her. They knew they had a volatile and toxic relationship and would fight, break up, but then get back together again. Police arrested Robert. They announced that they weren't looking for anyone else based on evidence found and admissions made. They charged him with murder and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Robert pleaded not guilty. It was the prosecution case that Robert, who had a Facebook cover photo of the bloody chainsaw scene from American Psycho, had an on-off relationship with Tasha, and they would often argue, and that on the 10th of February, 2013, one of those arguments tragically resulted in Tasha's death. It was their case that the day before Tasha's death, the 9th of February, Tasha met up with friends. The court heard that Tasha spent time with friends on Folly Beach having fun, and the jury were shown pictures of a smiling Tasha that were taken just hours before her death. Robert was at work that day and went to a party afterwards. But the prosecution told the jury that didn't stop him trying to create an argument with Tasha via text messages. The prosecution told the court that Tasha's demeanor changed when she received a text from Robert. The jury heard that the argument escalated when they both got home. See, the defendant was angry. When Tasha got home, he and Tasha argued about her ex-boyfriend, and you will hear in his own words what he did to the person he supposedly cared about. Now, the prosecution told the jury that the fight turned physical. He hit her really hard. He hit her because she was yelling for help. So what was his solution to that problem? He started strangling her because she wouldn't be quiet. The prosecution believed that Tasha was killed sometime between midnight and 2 a.m. on the 10th of February. The jury heard testimony from Charleston Police Department Detective Richard Holmes, who told the court that Robert and Tasha argued about her ex-boyfriend and sex. That resulted in him strangling her. But he didn't stop there. After he strangled her, he was in the room and heard her gasping for air. He went in the kitchen and got a butcher knife and came back and stabbed her multiple times. Now the court heard that Tasha was choked, hit in the head with a hammer because she was screaming, and then strangled again. At that point, she wasn't dead, so Robert went into the kitchen, got a butcher knife, and stabbed her 15 times with it. The knife was still in her chest when her colleagues found her. The court heard that when police arrived, Robert was in bed, and when they woke him, he sat upright with wild eyes. They could not make out what he was saying, as it just sounded like he was mumbling. Police found a bottle of vodka, marijuana, ibuprofen, and a knife on the bedside table next to the bed that he was sleeping on. Robert was covered in blood when police found him, and he had what appeared to be self-inflicted cuts on his wrists. There was a 3-inch vertical laceration to his left wrist. Robert claimed that he had tried to take his own life twice, but it didn't work. The court heard that when Robert was taken to the hospital for treatment, he made certain admissions, including that he had taken cocaine. Detectives testified that he told them that he took sleeping pills, aspirin, drank alcohol, and tried to slit his own wrists. The prosecution played an audio tape for the jury, which they told the jury was a confession that Robert made. It was recorded when Robert was in hospital. In the recording, Robert can be heard saying that he grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed Tasha and tried to kill himself. The court heard testimony from one of Robert's friends, a man named Paul Polensky. Paul agreed to testify on behalf of the prosecution. The court heard that they were good friends and both worked together at a James Island pizza restaurant. He testified that in the early hours of that 10th of February morning, just after Tasha was murdered, he received a text from Robert's phone that had 911 written 4 times. Paul called him and testified that Robert asked him not to talk to him on the cell phone and to call him back from the landline at work instead. Paul did, and Robert said, "Don't freak out, but I just killed my girlfriend." Paul testified that he had been friends with Robert for a long time, and he even helped Robert get a job, so when he heard that, he thought that Robert was just joking. He had worked with him the evening before, and he was aware that Robert went to a party after work, so he didn't take it seriously at first, as he presumed Robert was drunk. But he soon realized that it wasn't a joke. Paul had been aware that Robert was arguing with Tasha that night, but did not realize the extent of it until Robert outlined what he did. Paul testified that Robert told him that he hit Tasha, and she began screaming, and he tried to choke her to make her stop. Robert told Tasha he would let her up if she stopped screaming. Paul testified that Robert did that 3 times, but she wouldn't stop screaming, so he grabbed the closest object that was next to him. That object happened to be a hammer, and he used it to hit her in the head with it. When asked if he called the police, Paul confirmed that he did not, as Robert assured him he would turn himself in the next day. The court heard testimony from the forensic pathologist, Dr. Susan Presnell, and she testified that the manner of Tasha's death was homicide, and the jury were shown pictures that were taken during the autopsy. The pictures showed Tasha with a black eye, a smashed nose, and multiple cuts and bruises to her face, lip, and neck. Some of the blows were consistent with being caused by a hammer. Tasha was also stabbed multiple times in the chest. The court heard that Tasha's blood was found on the hammer found in the house. The prosecutor, Chad Simpson, told the jury that there should be no doubt that Robert was guilty, and finding him guilty was an easy decision for them to make. the prosecutor asked the jury to consider that if it wasn't murder, then what was it? The defense told the jury that Robert caused Tasha's death, and that part wasn't in dispute. Robert's attorney, Charles Cochran, argued, "This case is going to be about what was going on in his heart that night. And that's what you're going to have to decide throughout the course of this week." It was the defense case that Robert killed Tasha, but it was in the heat of passion during an argument. The defense admitted Robert and Tasha argued about Tasha's ex-boyfriend, but that her death wasn't murder. It was a spontaneous crime of passion. The defense urged the jury to focus on fact and fact alone, and not to let emotion get in the way. Charles told the jury that this wasn't a case where somebody, namely his client, gets away with something, but rather they are charged for the correct crime. He said that in this case, Robert was out of control, and it was not an act of malice. This was all done in a frenzy, an uncontrolled frenzy with alcohol. A frenzy without the benefit of collecting one's thought. If Robert wasn't intoxicated, he would not have killed Tasha. He had no control over his own actions that night. The judge told the jury that while Robert was charged with murder and they could find him guilty of that charge, they could also consider the charge of voluntary manslaughter and find him guilty of that lesser charge if they saw fit based on the evidence they heard. The jury deliberated for just over an hour and found Robert guilty of murder and guilty of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. Robert began cursing at that point in the courtroom and had to be removed so that he could calm down. When he returned, he addressed Tasha's mother, Kimberly, and said, "I'm so sorry that I took her away from you." Robert's attorney asked the judge to sentence him to 35 years plus 5 years parole, as it was his first felony. Before Judge Roger Young handed down his sentence, the court heard from Robert's family. They told the judge that Robert was a troubled man and had struggled with substance abuse for many years. His addiction had robbed him of his childhood, his opportunity, his daughter, his loved ones, and now his freedom. The judge rejected the defense plea for 35 years. He did not believe it was a crime of passion and spoke directly to Robert and said that one thing made it clear that it was not some spontaneous act. You thought she was dead and walked away from her, heard that she was still alive and went back to finish her off. He went back and stabbed her, and he didn't just stab her once, he stabbed her 15 times. Robert was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. On the 6th of December 2017, Robert Kronsberg was found dead in his cell at the Broad River Correctional Institution in Columbia. He took his own life. It was the 7th of December 2001, a Friday. 31-year-old Janine Vaughn went to a local nightclub, the Metro Tavern, with friends after work on the Thursday night, the 6th of December. They were at the Metro Tavern in Bathurst, Australia. Janine left the Metro Tavern around 3:47 a.m. in the early hours of the Friday morning with her friend Jordan Morris and his girlfriend Juanita Murphy. They walked along George Street and then up Keppel Street near Machete Park. They planned to go to the Oxford Hotel, the Ox, for one last drink before heading home. It was just a few blocks away. Janine walked ahead of Jordan and Juanita, as Jordan and Juanita were arguing about something. Janine was upset, as she couldn't find her handbag. She was about 40 meters ahead of her friends. They saw a red vehicle stop near her, and she got in, and the car drove off. Her friends couldn't see who was driving the car. Janine never made it to the Ox. Her friends didn't know where she went or who she was with. Janine was supposed to work later that day. She was the manager of a menswear store, the Ed Harry menswear store, in Bathurst. But when a customer called at the store, they noticed it was closed and called their other store, which was in Lithgow, to let them know. It was very unusual for Janine not to let someone know if she would be late. The manager at the Lithgow store contacted the head office of Ed Harry Menswear and Zarina D'Souza, who was the state manager. Zarina attempted to contact Janine throughout the morning and made arrangements for the Bathurst store to be opened. Later that day, after hearing nothing at all from Janine, Zarina reported her missing to the police. Police discovered that Janine never made it home after the club on the Friday morning. They obtained CCTV footage from outside the club and observed Janine walking along the street. The weather was particularly bad. There was heavy rain in the early hours of that morning, but a car can be seen on the footage turning back and stopping beside Janine. The car did a U-turn and pulled up behind her. The footage shows the car door opening and Janine getting into the car. It was around 3:50 a.m. and Janine got into the front passenger seat. The car was stopped for around 30 seconds. Police believed the car was a bright red four-door medium-sized sedan similar to a Mitsubishi Magna or a Toyota Camry. Who was driving the red car? Police needed to find out. Janine's family and friends did not believe she would get into a car with a stranger. They believed she must have known who was driving the car. Janine was well known in the area. As she was the manager of the menswear store, she was acquainted with many people. The town itself had a population of just 27,000 people at the time, and Janine had lived there for 3 years. Janine grew up in New South Wales, Hunter Valley. She moved to Bathurst to be with her boyfriend. The relationship ended, but she remained in Bathurst. She had a job and had made friends there. She loved nothing more than going out with friends and having fun. And that night at the Metro Tavern had been no different to start with. But police discovered that when Janine left, she had no phone with her and no key to get into her house. A cleaner found her handbag at the Metro Tavern the next day. It was in the bathroom at the club. Police were not sure if Janine left it there herself and couldn't remember where she put it, or if it was hidden, as it was concealed and shoved in a corner with a number of packets of chips in front of it. Police appealed for information, and a woman, Lynette Borland, came forward. Lynette told police that she had been out the same night that Janine was. She was at a friend's house and left and tried to hitchhike a ride home. She told police that she was walking towards a service station nearby, in the hope that somebody would drive her back to her farm on the outskirts of town. Before Lynette got to the service station, she noticed a car appeared to be following her. Lynette told police that it was a red car, but she couldn't recall the make or model of it. According to Lynette, the man got out of the car and tried to lure her into the car. Lynette didn't recognize the driver, but described him as about 6 feet tall, 183 centimeters, with dark hair and fair skin, noticeably hairy arms, and a square jaw. She also recalled that he had pimples on his nose. When asked what time and where the incident happened, Lynette told police that it was just after 3:30 a.m. and happened 750 meters from where Janine was seen on the footage getting into a car. Police believed that the two incidents were connected. But despite the CCTV footage and Lynette's account of what happened, police still had no idea who was driving the red car. The investigation into Janine's disappearance was plagued from the outset with problems. Allegations were made that the police covered things up, mishandled evidence, and didn't record statements from witnesses accurately. A knife covered in blood was found on the driveway of a nursing home just a few days after Janine went missing, but it is not known whether it is connected to Janine's case or not, as the police handling the investigation lost it. At one point, police had 47 persons of interest on their file, and initially, 2 men in particular were questioned. The men were 38-year-old Andrew Jones, a local pharmacist, and Dennis Briggs. Both men had access to small red cars. Police were told that Dennis had confessed. A number of people told police that Dennis confessed to raping and murdering Janine. However, when questioned by police, he denied it and claimed that he had no involvement at all in relation to Janine's disappearance. His former partner, Julie Creve, said that he had not been taking his medication for his bipolar disorder. Police spoke to Andrew Jones. He also denied having anything to do with Janine's disappearance. He worked in the same shopping center where Janine worked. Andrew answered police questions and assisted with the investigation, but after answering questions on 3 different occasions, he opted not to assist any further without a lawyer present. Andrew Jones and Dennis Briggs were identified as persons of interest in the case, but there was nothing to connect them to Janine's disappearance. Another person of interest, and the reason why some people believed the investigation was tainted, was a local detective and former deputy mayor of Bathurst named Brad Hosemans. He was the officer originally in charge of the investigation, even though he faced charges in relation to a separate matter. It was alleged that he sexually assaulted a woman. He was charged with obscene exposure, assault, indecent assault, and assault occasioning actual bodily harm. The incident in question was alleged to have taken place at a Bathurst golf club bar on the 21st of October, 2001, 7 weeks before Janine disappeared. The alleged victim was a 24-year-old woman who worked at the club. Brad denied the claims, and he was later acquitted of those charges. Despite those charges, which were pending at the time of Janine's disappearance, Brad was allowed to be involved in Janine's case. But that was not the main cause of concern. There was another reason that Brad should not have had anything to do with Janine's case. There were question marks as to how well he knew her. Despite people making it clear that there was a connection of sorts between Brad and Janine, it was alleged that some of the statements that outlined or referred to their connection were not recorded in full or followed up on. Operation Ronnie was set up. It was an investigation by the Police Integrity Commission into the NSW police force, where Brad worked in relation to the investigation of the disappearance of Janine. The commission's investigation focused on the role of Brad in the initial investigation of Janine's disappearance and the manner in which any association between them was investigated. On the 2nd of June 2005, the Commissioner of Police received an anonymous letter. "Why haven't you done anything about this starred Hoseman here in Bathurst, especially about that he did that woman in who is still missing? He tried to FTQ her, and she knocked him back even on the night she went missing. Everyone knows about it, and you do too, and you haven't done anything about him. Put the B-starred in jail where he belongs. Some nurses at the Bathurst hospital know that he did it, and they are too frightened to speak up, and they were there that night, as he will get at them too, like he has others before." The investigation revealed that a number of people who knew Janine told police that she had mentioned Brad to them. The commission investigation revealed further details that had not been recorded and that were not on the police file. Janine's state manager at the store, Zarina D'Souza, told police that she had conversations with Janine around 4 to 6 weeks before Janine went missing, and Janine told her she had met an ex-copper who was also on the local council, and that she was going to go out with him. She told police that a couple of weeks after that, Janine told her that the guy wasn't for her and that he was harassing her. She claimed Janine told her he bought her flowers and made several phone calls. Janine didn't tell Zarina the ex-copper was Brad, but the fact he was on the local council at the time indicated it was him. Zarina told police that she told Janine to write down every time she saw him walking past the store in the work diary. Janine said she would. The 2001 diary for the Ed Harry Bathurst store has never been located. Rachel Green, a woman who worked at another clothing store in the town, told police that Brad asked her about Janine and said that he thought she was attractive. Others saw him walking past the menswear store and looking at Janine. Some friends claimed that Janine told them that Brad was calling her at night and asking her out. She declined, but she didn't know how to handle it due to his position. They described her as being concerned about what to do next, but she didn't seem scared. Daniel Murphy worked in the Ed Harry menswear store with Janine, and he told police that 1 or 2 weeks before Janine went missing, she told him that she received 2 calls. One was at 7 p.m. one night, and the next was 8 a.m. the next morning. When she called back, she got the reception for a motel, and they would not give her details of who was staying there. Rebecca Mari Medhurst, a friend of Janine, provided information to police about a conversation she had with Janine on the 5th of December, 2001. Janine was telling me that one of the local police officers had been showing interest in her. She said that Brad Hosemans had walked past the shop a few times and had waved at her and gave her a wink. She said that she had seen him talking on his mobile out the front, and that he smiled and looked into the shop while he was talking. Janine thought it was good because she thought he was a good sort and was flattered by his interest. The only thing was that she thought he had a bit of a bad reputation with a woman, sick that he was a womanizer. Janine was disappointed because she thought it was good that a more mature man was showing interest in her, particularly after she had been out with Dave, who was much younger and not ready to settle down. Brad denied that he expressed interest in dating Janine, but admitted he thought she was attractive. He said that he never called or sent her flowers or waved or winked when he walked past the menswear store. Further suspicion arose when it was determined that Brad may have been in Bathurst the night Janine went missing. When originally asked by police where he was, he told them he was at his mother's house in Newcastle from the 3rd to the 7th of December. But his phone records later revealed that he was back in Bathurst on the 6th of December. He purchased petrol at South Wyong on the 6th also, which would have indicated he was driving home from Newcastle. The commission found no evidence indicating Brad was involved in any way with Janine's disappearance, or that he had ever spoken to her or even met her. In relation to Janine's disappearance, Brad was cleared by the police investigation of any involvement. After the Police Integrity Commission, PIC investigation into the role of Brad came to an end, the Special Task Force, Strike Force Mountbatten, assisted in a search for Janine. A search had previously been carried out just a few months after she first went missing, at a number of areas around Mount Panorama, and some 30 hectares of bush was searched, but nothing of any value was found. That was the same with the later search. While some skeletal remains were uncovered in the search, they were not connected to Janine's case. Police presumed that Janine had died. A coronial inquest was conducted in 2009 to try to ascertain what may have happened to Janine. The inquest found that Janine had died, but her cause of death remained undetermined, as her body has not been located. The inquest heard from her family and friends. Janine's former partner, Philip Evans, said that she had been stalked by someone. He did not know who was following her, but noted that she had been left flowers, notes, and even lingerie on her car while she was at work. In relation to the alleged confession by Dennis Briggs, the inquest heard from Peter Barker, who told the coroner that Dennis confessed to him and that his eyes were fixed, like he was reliving something. He confirmed that Dennis later told him that he was making it up and that he was only joking. Evidence and statements were also referred to in relation to Brad and Andrew. But ultimately, after hearing from several witnesses over the course of 10 days, the coroner ruled that Janine was murdered by an unidentified person or persons. A few years later, in 2013, detectives from the Homicide Squad's Unsolved Homicide Unit established Strike Force Toko to reinvestigate Janine's disappearance. The reward for information, which leads to the arrest and conviction of those responsible, was increased to $1 million. The Homicide Squad commander, Detective Superintendent Scott Cook, said, "Our investigators have been meticulously working through what happened to Janine in the moments leading up to and after she got into the red car that morning. We know about 10 minutes before Janine was seen getting into the car, another woman was approached about 750 meters away by a man in what we believe is the same vehicle. He appealed to anyone who knows anything, no matter how small, to come forward. Janine has not been found. No body has been located. Nobody has been convicted in relation to her disappearance or murder. Police believe there are people in Bathurst who know what happened to Janine but have not yet revealed what they know." Case 2. It was the 24th of March, 2007, a Saturday. The family of 22-year-old Lindsay Ann Hawker were concerned. It wasn't like her not to get in touch. She was constantly in regular contact with them, but they hadn't heard from her at all that day. Lindsay lived with 2 teachers in Tokyo, Japan. She moved there in October 2006 so that she could spend a year teaching English with the Nova language school chain. Lindsay was from Brandon, near Coventry, England, United Kingdom, and moved to Japan after she completed her degree in England. She wanted to get some experience before starting her master's course. Her boyfriend, Ryan Garside, was due to fly out to meet her that summer so they could travel around Japan before returning to the United Kingdom. Lindsay was so excited about moving to Japan. She chose Japan as she knew how safe it was there. She studied the culture and wanted to be respectful to the people she met when she got there. Her father, Bill Hawker, purchased little bags of lavender for her to bring to Japan so that she could gift them to people she met along the way. Her parents visited Lindsay in Japan to celebrate her birthday, and they were struck by how well she fitted in there. She spoke Japanese and had a friendly and warm relationship with the locals. Despite living so far away, Lindsay remained in daily contact with her boyfriend, family, and friends who were back home in England. So when they couldn't get in contact with her on the 24th of March, they were worried. Due to the time difference, initially they thought she may just be out somewhere with friends, but when they still hadn't heard from her the next day, they were extremely concerned. Lindsay was due to teach classes on the Sunday and Monday, but she didn't show up to teach on either day, and she was reported missing to the police. Lindsay worked 6 days a week and had never missed one lesson, so there was reason to be concerned. Police retraced her steps. Her last entry on Facebook was a message to her boyfriend that read, "Love you lots, don't worry ap the guy who chased me home. It's just crazy Japan. Miss UX." Police discovered that a few days before Lindsay went missing, she told her boyfriend that a man who was on the same train as her, sitting across from her, got off at her stop. He told her she was his English teacher. When she corrected him and told him she wasn't, he chased her home and asked her if she would give him an English lesson. He drew a picture of her and gave it to her, and she agreed to give him an English lesson. Police obtained CCTV footage. They discovered that Lindsay met a man at a coffee shop early on the Saturday morning, the 24th of March. They discovered that he was the man from the train, and she had arranged to meet him at the coffee shop to give him a private English lesson. That was the last known sighting of her. It wasn't unusual for Lindsay to give private English lessons. Lindsay had given private lessons before. The school allowed it, but there were rules to follow. They must meet only in public places and leave a note with the name and address of the student they were meeting. Lindsay did all that. She arranged to meet the man at 9 a.m. in a coffee shop she was familiar with on the Saturday morning. Lindsay left the name and address of the man she had arranged to meet on a note in her apartment. And due to that, it was easy for police to trace him. The man was Tatsuya Ichihashi, and he was 29 years old. Nobody knew where Lindsay went after the English lesson, so police wanted to find Tatsuya, to ask him if he knew anything. They knew from the CCTV footage that Lindsay got a taxi with Tatsuya to his apartment complex after the English lesson. Police knew it was his apartment complex as they had the note Lindsay left with his address on it. The CCTV footage showed the taxi pulling up and Lindsay and Tatsuya getting out. The taxi waited a few minutes before driving off. When police spoke to the driver, he informed them that Lindsay had asked him to wait for her, but he left after 7 minutes when she did not return. Police went to Tatsuya's apartment, but they didn't knock on the door as they believed they had no probable cause to do so. At that point, they did not know where Lindsay was or if she had come to any harm. They observed that the lights were off in Tatsuya's apartment, but they could see movement and knew somebody was home. They waited outside, and eventually Tatsuya came out with a backpack on his back. They told him they needed to speak to him, and he fled. He managed to escape. When police entered his apartment, they made a devastating discovery. There was a bathtub on the balcony, and inside there was a mixture of sand and compost soil which partially concealed Lindsay's body. Her naked body was bound and gagged with plastic ties and scarves. There were bruises and injuries all over her body. Lindsay's head had been shaved, and her hair was found in a bag in Tatsuya's apartment. Police didn't know how she died at that point, but knew from the extent of her injuries that she had suffered a violent death. An autopsy confirmed that Lindsay was murdered and that she was strangled or suffocated to death. Her neck was broken. There were extensive bruises on Lindsay's body. Almost the entire front of her body and her back were covered in marks and bruises. The inside of her legs were covered in bruises. The marks indicated her attack was a sustained and vicious one and may have occurred over a 36-hour period. Lindsay's face had large marks and bruises all over it. There were egg-shaped bruises found on the left side of her face, and it was determined that they were likely caused by a fist. It was believed that other marks on her body likely resulted from falling into or being pushed onto furniture. The injuries showed that Lindsay was punched repeatedly, kicked, and a blunt instrument may have been used to beat her. There were defensive wounds on her arms. Police believed that Tatsuya attacked Lindsay, raped her, and then killed her before putting her body in the bathtub with the sand and compost soil to try to dispose of her body. Her parents were notified of her violent death. Lindsay's father, Bill, told the Times of London, "It was a horrific murder. There was literally not a square inch of her body that wasn't badly bruised." While police searched for Tatsuya, they began building a case against him. Between the time that Lindsay first went missing and when her body was found, they discovered that Tatsuya went to a local hardware store 6 times to purchase different materials to use to try to dispose of Lindsay's body. They discovered that Tatsuya had a Japanese girlfriend and they had been together for 1 year. She told police that she had no idea where Tatsuya was. The apartment where Tatsuya lived was owned by his parents, a doctor, and a dentist. And they also did not know where he was. They told police they had not heard from him since he went on the run. 1 year after Lindsay was murdered, Tatsuya had still not been found. Lindsay's parents flew to Tokyo to appeal to the people in Japan to help find her killer. Her father, Bill Hawker, said, "I have a dreadful feeling of helplessness, a horrible feeling of not being able to do anything. Last time I was here, I banged on the apartment door where she was murdered and promised Lindsay I'd find her killer. I haven't found him yet, but we won't give up. Despite pleas from Lindsay's family, a reward of 10 million yen for information leading to his arrest, and 8,000 reported sightings, it took 2.5 years before Tatsuya was found. He was arrested in November 2009 in Osaka, while waiting to board a ferry to the southern island of Okinawa. A passenger recognized him and told port officials, who in turn told the police. He was wearing a hat, sunglasses, and a paper surgical mask when he was arrested. Police discovered that soon after he went on the run, Tatsuya began to alter his appearance to avoid detection. He bound up his nose with a needle and thread to make his nose narrower. He stayed in Tokyo for a short period before traveling to Aomori Prefecture. He tried to cut off part of his lower lip to make it thinner using scissors. He had to wait a few days after the first attempt due to the excruciating pain before doing it a second time to achieve his desired look. When he later saw a wanted poster with his face on it, he cut off the moles on his left cheek using a box cutter. Along with altering his appearance, Tatsuya used false names and didn't stay in one place for too long. He also avoided certain places completely, and shops that had CCTV cameras. He managed to save 1 million yen, $12,100, while on the run from various construction jobs, and spent most of it on 2 plastic surgery operations. He had a nose job to make his nose even more narrow and longer, and the second surgery involved further work on his nose. He wanted to raise the bridge of his nose. That led to his downfall. The employees who worked at the second plastic surgery clinic he attended had to take a number of photographs of his face and noticed that he had traces of moles which had been removed. They thought that was unusual and reported it to police. Police believed it was Tatsuya, and the media notified the public to be on the lookout for him and to keep in mind that he had changed his appearance and that his nose in particular looked different. That brought a renewed interest to the case. Tatsuya saw the news report himself and bought a disguise, a beard, sideburns, and a mustache. But the public were on high alert again, and it was a member of the public who spotted him waiting for the ferry. Lindsay's parents, Bill and Julia Hawker, and her sisters flew to Japan for the trial. Tatsuya pleaded not guilty, but before his trial began, the court heard that he wanted to make an admission. He admitted he was responsible for Lindsay's death and admitted that he raped her, but claimed her death was an accident and he did not intend to kill her. He said, "In order to prevent her raising her voice, I covered her mouth and put my arms around her neck." It was the prosecution's case that Lindsay suffered a prolonged and violent death and died as a result of sustained pressure to her throat. The court heard that the prosecution did not believe her death was the result of an accident, and that there was nothing to indicate that he had attempted to resuscitate her. He didn't call an ambulance or ask anyone for help. Instead, he hid her body in a bathtub. It was the prosecution's case that Lindsay gave Tatsuya an English lesson in the coffee shop and went back to his apartment as he claimed he had forgotten to bring his wallet and said he had money at his apartment. Lindsay planned to stay just for a minute or two until she received her payment, and that was evident by her actions. She asked the taxi driver to wait outside for her, but the court heard that almost as soon as Lindsay set foot into the apartment, Tatsuya administered strong blows to her face. Most of the blows were inflicted around her right eye. It was their case that Lindsay tried to fight back, so Tatsuya bound her so that he could rape her. The court heard about the extent of the injuries that were found on Lindsay's body and the autopsy results. They claimed that he killed her to hide the fact that he raped her. It was the defense's case that Lindsay died as the result of an accident. The court heard from Tatsuya himself. He admitted raping Lindsay at his home and abandoning her body. He told the court that Lindsay died because he tried to stop her from screaming, and as a result, he accidentally suffocated her. "I didn't intend to kill her. but I am responsible for her death. I was the one who scared her and left her dead. I am very sorry for what I did. Yes, I raped her. Yes, I agree that Lindsay died because of my actions. But I did not mean to kill her. Only Lindsay and I know what really happened that day. But she can no longer speak for herself because of me. It is my responsibility to tell the truth throughout this trial. He claimed that he didn't even realize he was putting too much pressure on her neck and that he tried to revive her. Tatsuya was found guilty. The court believed he intended to murder Lindsay when he put pressure on her neck. The presiding judge, Masaya Hota, told the court he raped her to satisfy his sexual desire, then tried to cover up the rape by killing her. He then attempted to conceal the murder by abandoning her body. The crime was inexcusable and savage. Tatsuya has repeated irrational, unnatural statements that are contradicted by the evidence. We do not believe that he has reflected on his crime from the bottom of his heart. Before the court sentenced Tatsuya, Bill Hawker asked them to show Tatsuya no mercy and give him the death penalty. The court declined to do so. Tatsuya was sentenced to life in prison. The court outlined the reasons that they opted not to give the death penalty. Tatsuya has no criminal record and is not a criminal by nature. He is still young. Perhaps he has a chance to make a new start, or to be corrected. Under Japanese law, Tatsuya will have to serve a minimum of 10 years before being eligible for parole. After the sentencing hearing, Bill spoke to the media. We have waited 4.5 years to get justice for Lindsay, and we have achieved that today. We are very pleased. I would also like to thank the Japanese people. We would not have got this far without everyone's help. Lindsay loved Japan, and you have not let her down. Thank you. Now, before Tatsuya went on trial, he published a book called Until the Arrest. The book does not include any details of the crime itself, but focuses on his time while he was on the run. The book gives details of how he avoided getting caught for the 2.5 years that he was on the run, and how he traveled between Aomori in Japan's north to Okinawa, a subtropical island in the far south, and his day-to-day activities. The book also details the changes he made to his face, from his own cutting and slicing actions to his 2 plastic surgeries. Tatsuya appealed his sentence, but the High Court upheld it. Case 3. It was the 1st of July 2000, a Saturday. 21-year-old Lucy Blackman told her roommate, Louise Phillips, that she had arranged to meet a man who wanted to purchase a cell phone for her. She left their apartment wearing a plain black dress and black sandals. Lucy didn't tell Louise who the man she planned to meet was, but Louise assumed it was somebody that Lucy met at the club where they worked in Tokyo, Japan. Lucy was from Sevenoaks, Kent, England, United Kingdom, but she left there in May 2000 with Louise so that they could travel around Asia. Lucy's parents, Tim Blackman and Jane Steer, were divorced, and Lucy, the oldest of 3 children, wanted a few months to clear her head and decide what she wanted to do with her own life and with her career. Lucy and Louise planned to spend the summer in Tokyo, and they got a job as hostesses at the Casablanca Club in the Roppongi district in Tokyo. When they lived in England, they both worked for British Airways as flight attendants, so the hostess role appealed to them as it involved making people feel welcome, and the role required the hostesses to have good conversational skills, which was a skill that was required for working in the aviation industry also. Lucy fit in well at the club. Her colleagues loved working with her as she was always happy and had a great sense of humor. The clients and customers at the club loved her too. as she was easy to talk to and very attractive. The club where Lucy worked was a hostess club. They are popular in Japan. They are essentially there to look after men, cater to their needs, and make money for the owners. The hostesses are an integral part of the business. They welcome the men, normally wealthy businessmen, into the clubs, sit beside them, top up their drinks, light their cigarettes for them, and spend the night talking to them. They are intimate settings. But despite appearances, many actually forbid the hostesses from having any sort of sexual encounter with the customers. The idea is that it's all a fantasy, and that is what makes the men return time and time again and to spend more of their money. Some clubs also encourage what are referred to as dohans, which are essentially dates that take place outside the club. The hostesses meet the customer and have a lavish dinner with them and then return to the club. Lucy's club required the hostesses to go on a number of such dates every month. So that day, the 1st of July, Louise assumed that Lucy was on one of those types of dates. That evening at 7 p.m., Lucy called Louise and told her she would be home in an hour. But Lucy never made it home that night. Louise was concerned and tried to find Lucy. But when there was still no sign of her on the Monday morning, the 3rd of July, Louise called Lucy's mother, Jane, who was in the United Kingdom, and told her that Lucy was missing. Lucy's father, Tim, and Lucy's sister, Sophie, flew out to Tokyo to search for her. Tokyo is one of the most crowded cities in the world, so her family knew they needed as much help as they could get. They sought the help of the then British Prime Minister, Tony Blair, who provided assistance to them. He went to Japan for a G8 meeting and asked that everything possible be done to find Lucy. That brought a lot of media attention to the case. The family also hired a private investigator. It emerged that the club where Lucy worked did not provide as much security as a lot of similar clubs did, and they would not provide any assistance to Lucy's family. As Lucy did not tell Louise who she was meeting that day, they had no idea if it was even a customer or not. One of the hostesses at the club who worked with Lucy told the private investigator that she observed a man at the club a few days before Lucy went missing. She gave the private investigator a description of what he looked like. Reports were made to police that Lucy had been seen at the seaside, 30 miles outside of Tokyo. They said that Lucy was with a man, and the description they provided of the man matched the description the hostess gave to the private investigator of the man who was at the club. Louise received a call from an unknown man. The caller told her that Lucy would not be coming home for some time. Police arrested a man called Joji Obara in relation to a separate case that involved a sexual assault allegation that had been made against him. Joji was a very wealthy man. He studied law and politics before working for his parents' business, which was a real estate business. As a result, he made millions of dollars and liked to show off his wealth and spend it. He had boats, Ferraris, and expensive watches, and seemed to like to date Western women, and frequented many of the hostess clubs. When Joji was arrested, a number of other women came forward to share their experiences with him. They, too, alleged they had been sexually assaulted. There were many women, Japanese and Western, and they all had a similar story to tell. They alleged that Joji would take them out for dinner, and then they would wake up the next day, and he would tell them that they drank too much the night before. The women believed that he put drugs in their drink and sexually assaulted them while they were unconscious. When Joji was asked about the allegations, he claimed any sexual encounter he had was always consensual. The police searched his properties. Joji owned several apartments, one of which was a seaside condominium. They discovered that he had videotaped around 400 sexual encounters with the women, many of which involved rape. While there was initially no direct connection between him and Lucy, police discovered that phone records showed that Lucy used his phone the evening of the 1st of July. 7 months after Lucy was last seen alive on the 9th of February 2001, police made a horrifying discovery. At the seaside, just 200 yards from Joji's home, along a cliff in the town of Miura, they found body parts, including a severed head partially encased in cement in a cave. It was confirmed, via the use of dental records, that the body parts were those of Lucy Blackman. The cement used to encase Lucy's severed head, found in the cave, was of a similar kind to that found in Joji's condominium. Some people came forward to notify police that they saw him with cement on his hands. Joji denied any involvement in Lucy's death. He was charged with her rape and murder. He admitted that he was with her the night she went missing, but denied that he killed her. He also faced further charges in relation to other matters. He was charged with the rape of 8 other women and sexual violence resulting in death for allegedly drugging and raping an Australian woman, Carita Ridgway, in 1992. All of the women were hostesses and worked in the Roppongi district of Tokyo. It took 6 years to bring the case to trial. Prosecutors sought a life sentence. They told the court that Joji exhibited a history of violence and aggression towards women. He targeted women who worked as hostesses, as he believed their allegations would not be taken seriously. And he was correct. A number of the women who alleged that Joji drugged and raped them reported the matter to the police long before Lucy disappeared, but no thorough investigations were carried out. As a result, he was free to continue carrying out the same vicious assaults and videotaping them time and time again. It was the prosecution's case that the rapes always began the same way. He would meet the woman at the hostess clubs and invite them to his condominium for a dohan. He would slip a drug into their drink without their knowledge, and when they were unconscious, he would rape them and videotape it. The court heard that in 1992, a woman by the name of Carita Ridgway died under suspicious circumstances. Carita moved to Tokyo from her home in Australia and worked as a hostess. In 1992, Carita was admitted to hospital by a man who referred to himself as Akira Nishida. The prosecution told the court that Akira was in fact Joji. When he brought Carita into the hospital, he told the medical staff there that she had suffered food poisoning after eating a bad oyster. Carita died from liver failure that was consistent with poisoning from an excess of chloroform. Police believe that both Carita and Lucy died from an overdose of drugs administered by Joji. They also believe that Joji panicked when he realized Lucy was dead and dismembered her body in an attempt to get rid of the evidence. It was the defense's case that Joji was not guilty in relation to all of the charges he faced. When faced with the videotape evidence, he argued that it was all consensual. He claimed that Lucy and Carita took drugs themselves. Joji was found guilty of 8 counts of rape and the charge of sexual violence resulting in death in relation to Carita's death. In relation to Lucy's death, the court believed that while he was guilty of abducting Lucy and dismembering her body, he was not guilty of her murder. Judge Hiroshi Kadono said that the prosecution had failed to prove Joji fatally drugged Lucy. Joji was sentenced to life in prison. It is believed that he raped many more women than the number of charges he faced in court. Not only did he have hundreds of videotapes, he kept a diary which had details of dates, places, and varying cocktails of drugs that had been used on each woman. Lucy's mother, Jane, was devastated when Lucy's father, Tim, accepted what is referred to as a condolence payment of nearly $850,000 from a friend of Joji. She believed that the court would take that into account when sentencing Joji, but the court assured the family that that had not been taken into account. Tim used some of the money to set up a charity in Lucy's name, the Lucy Blackman Trust. It has since been rebranded and is called LBT Global. They provide assistance to families who have missing loved ones overseas.